All right, everybody, how's it going? Believe we are ready. Ben, you ready?
I can get my hat on, man.
Oh, please, get your hat on. What's a Ben Joravsky show without Ben wearing his hat?
Miles, where's your hat?
I'm not wearing a hat.
Well, Miles has his hat.
All right, your Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, December 19th is just moments away. If you can hear us, please. Oh, my goodness, Ben's getting his headphones adjusted.
I got the headphones on, man.
If you can hear us on the live stream chat, let us know. Oh, Bruce put a bunch of pizza emojis up.
Ooh, I'm hungry.
Okay.
God dang. Get those pizzas in the studio.
Your Ben Joravsky show for Thursday, December 19th is just moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, sponsor this show, as well as the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. A giant thank you to those unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this show. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. YouTube live stream chat room. Let us know if you can hear our song of the day.
Dum 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 dum. Whoa 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 whoa.
One of these days it'll be a song within the last 30 years.
Da 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 da. Any hi boo boo bye bye. I don't even know the name of that song. I think it's the Del Vikings. Whoa 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 whoa. It's from the 50s, man. Hey, the 50s. Whoa.
The Ben Joravsky show starts now. Thursday, December 19th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, progressive politics within these times writer Miles Kampf-Lassin, impeachment and pensions with union man Jeff Johnson, and its Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Benny J. Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Crybaby Thursday. And here's why. Woke up this morning to the sounds of sobbing. It was Republicans, D, crying like the little babies that they are over the impeachment of President Donald Trump. I'm going to sum up what those crybaby Republicans were saying. It was so unfair. It's so partisan. It's so unnecessary. It's so mean. It's so cruel. They're so vindictive. They only want to undo the election of 2016, which, by the way, we only won because of that crazy electoral system. I've never seen anything like it. Nancy Pelosi is so mean. Boo-hoo-hoo. Man, to hear those crybaby Republicans, you would think that the Democrats invented nastiness in politics. I could go on and on and on about how nasty, mean, racist, anti-Semitic, if it has to be, Republicans will be in order to win an election. But let me just go back to the impeachment of Billy Clinton back in the 1990s. Now, D, you're always giving me a hard time for going back in time, but at least I'm not going back to the 50s to sing dum 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 ba doo be dum. Whoa, 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 whoa. Sorry, I just had to get that song out of my system a little while. No, I'm going back to the 90s. Even you were around in the 90s,
Yeah,
right?
I was, yeah.
I think Miles may have been around
Yes.
a little bit in the 90s. So I'm not going back that far. The President of the United States was one William Jefferson Clinton. He got himself in a whole bunch of mess because he's an unfaithful, lying dog. There you go. And was playing around in the White House. Actually, the Republicans started investigating Bill Clinton from the moment he entered the White House. So there are a lot of parallels between what the Republicans did to Billy C. in 1992 and what the Democrats had done to Donald J. Trump. But it's funny, I didn't hear Republicans crying back in the 1990s when they were doing it to Billy C. They were looking for everything and anything they could to find on him, to undercut his presidency. They had so many investigations going. They're looking at real estate deals from years before. They were accusing him of murder. Even now today, Dennis and I, we hear tapes of comedians accusing Billy Clinton of murder based on Republican investigations from the 1990s.
Yeah, just one, Norm MacDonald.
A couple others too, maybe.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Anyway, they finally, it took them like 5 years. They caught him. They got him lying about being unfaithful, lying about having a sex outside the marriage, lying about his affairs with Monica Lewinsky, and they nailed him. They had him dead to right. Let's face it. Had nothing to do with being president. It had nothing to do with anything facing the country. But they had him, and they went with it. And they had impeachment. Since they controlled the Congress, they rammed impeachment through. Got to send it to the Senate, which the Democrats controlled. So it's very similar to what's going on today. I would say there's way more legitimacy in the Democratic investigation. But in terms of just the basic setup, very similar. And they were really outraged, the Republicans in the 90s. They said there was a principle here. A president cannot lie. How about that? Standing up for the notion that a president can't lie. Trump lies every day he wakes up. Well, and now they just got to go, well, that's just Trump being Trump. All right, but back then it was a president cannot lie. And moreover, a president has to be true. He sets the president is like the chief figure in our country. The lessons that we take from the presidency affect our children. What are they going to think if they see us condoning behavior of this president in the White House who's playing around with women who are not his wife? Well, then, guess what, man? This was unbelievable. It turns out that Newt Gingrich, who was the Speaker of the House when they launched the proceedings into Clinton, turns out he was playing around with a woman who's not on his wife, so he had to step down. They replaced him with a gentleman named Robert Livingston. I'm probably the only guy in America who remembers this dude. Turns out he had played around with a woman who's not his wife. He had to step down. They replaced him with a dude named Denny Hastert, who was an old wrestling coach here in the western suburbs, and he was the Speaker of the House when the Republicans impeached Billy Clinton. Guess what? 20 or so years later, Denny Hastert wound up in prison because it turns out he was covering up his being a sexual predator to some of the kids on his wrestling team. How about that for the Republicans? Just the unremitting hypocrisy of it all. That they impeached Billy Clinton anyway. They worked themselves up into a real moral lather. In fact, I have just to quote somebody, a Republican that I know. And this article was sent to me last night by a listener to the show and a longtime reader, Lauren. He was so outraged by this article that he dug up. I didn't even dig up this article, but this article is written by Dennis's favorite columnist in the city of Chicago, one jump shot Johnny Cass. That's John Cass, not to be confused with Johnny Cash.
There you go.
All right, and John Cass.
I love him.
Chicago Tribune columnist. Big-time supporter of Donald John Trump, thinks it's so unfair that the Democrats are impeaching him. And in the 1990s, he had a different view on the world. He was a huge supporter of the impeachment of Billy C. And this is what he wrote at the critical time when the Congress was coming together to vote on whether they should impeach Bill Clinton. He goes, "Our children are judging us on this matter. We can tell them that in America, we could tell them that in the America we made for them, everything is relative, and it's only the money that matters, that it's the economy, stupid," which is kind of the argument that a lot of Republicans are making about Donald Trump right now. We could say to the kids that we accept the Oval Office being turned into a whorehouse because our stock portfolios have been well fed, which is kind of an argument I hear from a lot of Republicans. Not so much that the Oval Office is turned into a whorehouse, but it doesn't really matter that Donald Trump was like paying off his mistresses to shut him up so they wouldn't talk about the fact that he was having sex with them outside his marriage when his wife was pregnant. We could tell him that it's acceptable to raise your hand and swear to tell the truth and then perjure yourself before a grand jury as long as the job approval poll numbers are up. Well, I can't say that Donald Trump has raised his hand and sworn to tell the truth because he won't go before any grand jury or any investigator, let alone raise his hand and swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, because he doesn't want to tell the truth. Because if he tells the truth, it'll undercut everything he's been saying, which is a bunch of lies up to now. We can explain to our children that we support using the presidency to trash the reputations of women who have dared complain about unwelcome sexual advances, as long as the president, in turn, supports our own political agendas. Well, if that doesn't sum up the Republican Party in the age of Trump, I don't know what does. Donald Trump has multiple accusations against him for sexual harassment, including some of rape. And what does Donald Trump do? Routinely trashes the reputation of the women who make those accusations, and the Republican Party just bury their head, go right along with it. He quotes Aristotle. Thousands of years ago, Aristotle set down a fundamental truth about human beings. He said we can become brave by doing brave things, we can become cowards by doing cowardly things, that we can become good by doing good things, that we become liars by lying. He was right, that our actions shape and define us. Well, that was then. Today, Republicans are absolutely doing everything that John Cass accused the Democrats of doing in the 1990s. They're looking the other way as their president lies. They're looking up the other way as the president carries on outside his marriage. They're looking the other way as the president trashes the reputation of anybody who dares to disagree with him. And they're looking the other way as the Democrats have put together a pretty solid case of Donald Trump trying to extort Ukraine into they don't even digging up dirt on Joe Biden, just saying they're investigating Joe Biden. But it's all about the politics right now. And so the Republicans are lined up, supporting their president, crying like little babies. I'll tell you what was that you said yesterday? It was very true. We were talking about the Chicago Democrats and the mayor, the mayor's lawyer, who was when he claimed 2 homeowner exemptions on properties, one in the suburbs and one in the city. They said it was a mistake, even though it was a rule. What was that?
Rules for thee, not for me.
Rules for thee, not for me. It's true with Chicago Democrats, and it's really true with Republicans. We got a great show today, everybody. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be in the studio. I'm curious what he has to say about impeachment from in these times. He will also talk about the debates. All this impeachment talk, D, we forgot that there's the presidential debates tonight. So we'll be talking about that. Jeff Johnson will be in the studio, a union man, pension expert. We'll be talking about pension stuff. And I know Jeff Johnson's got a thing or two to say about the impeachment. And Brandon Johnson will be here at the end of the show. We'll be talking absolutely everything. Brandon Johnson, Cook County Board Commissioner. We'll be talking local politics, national politics. Lots of political talk ahead. But before we do any of that, the young man from Alton, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois, they call him the doctor, with the news.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? My name's Dennis. Yes, President Donald Trump has been impeached.
No collusion.
And listeners,
no collusion there.
And listeners, I'm sure a lot of you would like us to keep going with the impeachment punditry. Well, we're going to step away from that for the moment. But listeners, I can promise all of you that this man sitting right next to me will be talking impeachment so much during today's program that even you will feel like you've been impeached. And honestly, don't worry, because he'll more than likely bring it up as we find out what's happening in Chicago and or Illinois this afternoon. Focus, Ben, focus.
Rules for thee, not for me.
We begin with the Chicago mayor.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Today, Mayor Lori Lightfoot is at the Pullman Walmart with other elected officials. She's there to provide holiday toys to families, students, and community members. Did she check out what goodies were in the Walmart $5 DVD bin? Well, she's crazy if she didn't. You'll find some good movies in that thing. All right, we're done talking about the mayor for now. Unless, Ben, there's anything you'd like to add?
No, I didn't know where you're. Great pre-show prep in the Ben Joravsky show. I had no idea where you're going with that. But
Please stop admitting that.
I do agree that there's some great bargains to be found in the DVD bin at Walmart's.
All right, no Thursday public events scheduled for our Illinois governor. Nope, J.B. Pritzker is hanging back today, probably watching some $30 Target DVD, and more than likely at the Thompson Center in some office. And I guess that's really it on Governor Pritzker. Anything you'd like to add?
We'll be talking Pritzker and pensions with Jeff Johnson a little later today.
Okay. Look forward to that, listeners. So with that out of the way, let's talk local election news, huh? What do you say?
Right, let's go.
All right, 2 Illinois candidates have made headlines today. First up, it's the actual Democrat running in the 3rd Congressional District race, Marie Newman. So far in her second go-around for the seat, Newman has definitely led the election in big-name endorsements. We got names like 2020 presidential candidates Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker. Former presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand. Remember her?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of do. Local figures like Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, State Rep Kelly Cassidy, our Benny J bonus guest on Monday that you can also check out on YouTube, 35th Ward Alderman, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, the cannabis czar, Toy Hutchinson, and even the New York Congresswoman herself, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, have publicly shown their support for Marie Newman in the 3rd Congressional District. Well, we got one more to add to the list. And if you know who this person is, there's a very good chance that you have a Bernie Sanders poster, bumper sticker, thermos, something. It's Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She's co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She has endorsed Marie Newman. Here's the quote from Jayapal about Marie Newman. Quote, "She is dedicated to protecting the rights of immigrants, fighting for health care for all, protecting Social Security, and above all else, defending the civil rights of everyone in her community." Well, that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, looking over at the endorsements for her not-so-democratic opponent, Dino Dan Lipinski, nothing.
No endorsements.
But keep in mind, Lipinski did receive an endorsement from a pretty big name during the last election, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, no, that was that.
Correct.
I don't know how this is going to unfold now. This is an interesting race. Everything is up and down in this race. Dan Lipinski, we've talked about this a lot. Dan Lipinski is the son of William Lipinski, the former congressman from that district who literally handed the job over to young Daniel. He is the most conservative Democrat in the House, I would say. Very much against abortion rights, very inconsistent on immigration rights. I think at one point voted against Obamacare. He is very much the last of the Mohicans when it comes to being a conservative Democrat in Illinois. As such, Marie Newman ran against him in 2018, came very close to unseating him. He defeated her in a large degree by mobilizing support from the anti-abortion activists in the area who flooded the district to pound on doors for him. But he was also the beneficiary of Nancy Pelosi's endorsement because Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, has an attitude similar to that of Michael Joseph Madigan, who is Speaker of the House here in Illinois, and that is she supports her caucus members. I don't know if she'll continue to support him in this election. This will be really interesting to see how she goes here. Now, he has been walking a very fine line here on the impeachment matter. And the interesting thing for Lipinski is he's concerned that if he doesn't vote for impeachment, he will aggravate Democratic activists in the ward in the district, and they'll turn against him in the primary. And to the same degree, he doesn't want to upset Trump supporters in the area because that's a part of his base of support as well. And apparently he came to the conclusion that the activists in the Democratic Party would be more at play in the primary to come, and so it was probably a safer, shrewder idea not to alienate them. So he voted for the impeachment to avoid that as an issue. But this is a showdown, second round, and if the liberals, the lefties, the progressives are definitely lining up behind Marie Newman on this one. So.
Up next, it's incumbent Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx, now very similar to Marie Newman. Kim Foxx has received a handful of big endorsements in her re-election campaign, but that's nothing new. We've talked about that already. But what is new is the recent story involving Kim Foxx's campaign contributions. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and Rachel Hinton, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx is keeping nearly $30,000 in campaign contributions from a 2016 fundraiser hosted by the guy who was busted by the feds for such acts as shaking down a Burger King, the now indicted 14th Ward Alderman Edward Burke. Rachel Hinton goes on to remind us that this is a departure from the approach taken by her political mentor during the mayoral runoff, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. But if you were to ask the Kim Foxx campaign, they would tell you that this is not true. Fox's campaign said it donated the money personally given by Burke and his family to two nonprofit groups. Sylvia Ewing, a spokeswoman for Fox's campaign, said, quote, "All of these things are just distractions from the work that Foxx is doing, making change and reform to the criminal justice system in her office." The quote from Sylvia Ewing goes on, quote, "The money that came from the Burke family was given to two nonprofit organizations. Money collected beyond that was part of her war chest, and she doesn't think that we've done anything wrong in keeping the money that was beyond their personal contribution." Ewing also said the campaign is being, quote, "straight up and candid about how the money was distributed, and there's not much more to say beyond that." But according to the Sun-Times piece, records from the Illinois State Board of Elections do not show Foxx returning the contributions that she received. Ben, do we believe this? And if she didn't give the money back to Ed Burke, should she?
Well, I don't know if she should give the money back to Ed Burke, but she should show proof that she donated the money to the charities. In other words, the issue is, did she keep the money? And I wouldn't give it back to Ed Burke. Why does he need the money? He would just spend it on. First of all, he would just spend it on his defense attorneys. And he's not allowed to do that. We had Adolfo Mondragon in the studio talking about this quite a bit. When Democrats get in trouble in Cook County, they end up spending their the campaign money they raise for their political campaigns on their defense lawyers. Well, that's not why people gave it to them. That's a violation of the whole purpose of campaign disclosure laws. So you should not, in my humble opinion, spend your money on your criminal defense needs. And you show, in the case of Ed Burke, now Ed Burke, part of the reason he was so powerful for so many years, Carlos was just talking about this the other day. Carlos Ramirez-Rosa was in the show, alderman from the 35th Ward. You just alluded to it. He did a bonus interview, which we'll drop on Monday, I want to say, right, D?
And you can check it out on YouTube.
Yes, it's on YouTube already. We decided to put it on YouTube. Anyway, when we began the interview, Carlos, it was yesterday, and there had been the last city council meeting before Christmas, and so Carlos was displaying all the presents that the aldermen get from other aldermen. You know, there was one from McDonald's. Remember, that was like a little box with a McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
McDonald's gave each alderman a little present, but there was a cup from Walter Burnett, alderman of the 27th Ward. But wait, I think we have that cup.
Is that right here?
We have that cup.
I'm holding the cup.
Walter Burnett gave it to Carlos, and Carlos gave it to us. Thank you, Carlos.
It's got Tootsie Rolls in it.
He's got the Tootsie Rolls, yeah. Please tell our guests that. No, don't tell our guests that, because then they'll open up.
There you go. You're figuring it out. Took you long enough.
Anyway, so Carlos also was talking about the good old days, in quotes, when Ed Burke would really, pass out presents to absolutely everybody in the city council. I think it was cufflinks or something like that. And what Carlos was saying, that Ed Burke was establishing himself as sort of like the big daddy of the Chicago City Council. He takes care of all his little kids. And part of, he had a similar reputation. As soon as someone got elected, he would show up at a fundraiser and drop off a couple $100s to let him know that he supported them now that they were his colleague in the Chicago City Council. And he was also fundraising for Tony Preckwinkle and apparently Kim Foxx. So this is how Ed Burke kept his power. He took care of people this way, made contributions, gave presents, and they tended to look the other way at the fact that they figured he was up to no good with his property tax business, where he was using his connections to try to get big property tax breaks from downtown property owners, including one, Donald John Trump. All right, it all comes together here. Anyway, Ed Burke has since been disgraced. He's been indicted. He's facing trial. He was still reelected by the voters of the 14th Ward. He's running for reelection as Democratic committeeman. Nobody wants anything to do with him. They certainly don't want to take his campaign donations. Carlos said he didn't give any gifts yesterday. He's just a regular alderman in the Chicago City Council. Hardly says anything anymore. And so, yes, Kim Foxx, if she wants to maintain any credibility, should not hold on to money that Ed Burke gave her. And but in my opinion, she should not return it to Ed Burke. She should demonstrate that she donated it to charity.
She said she did, but the records don't show it. We'll have to wait and see what the deal
Show
is with
the
that.
receipts.
Show
okay?
the receipts.
Come
okay?
on, show the receipts.
Come on.
And put this one to rest.
Put it
once
to
and for
rest.
all. Yeah, that's how I view it.
And since we're talking about all this damn dirty corruption in Illinois, the Illinois Gaming Board has moved to strip video gambling operator Rick Heidner of his license after accusing him of offering a $5 million illegal inducement to the owner of a chain of gambling parlors.
Oh, this was in the Tribune today.
Yeah.
I was reading this one on the train coming in. This is one of those really complicated, convoluted Chicago corruption story. I don't know if we're really going to have the time to get into it, but this is typical me. The part, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, the part that really got me going was like the Jason Meisner, who was the writer of the story, did a good job of like showing where all these secret meetings between these operatives was going down in this story. And it would be like one meeting at this like a coffee shop here or a diner there, and the whole time I'm like, oh man, I'm hungry. I wish I was at the diner. Anyway, wheeling and dealing in Chicago, absolute corruption everywhere you go.
According to the Gaming Board complaint in the Chicago Tribune, the state disciplinary action centers on a deal in which Heidner's Gold Rush Gaming stood to have its gambling machines taken out of 44 spots owned by Laredo Hospitality Ventures. Good Lord, our state is awful.
Yeah.
And
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we got one more corruption update. During Wednesday's city council meeting, the city council passed an ordinance Wednesday that bans aldermen from being paid lobbyists and prohibits elected officials from outside the city from lobbying in Chicago. This measure was carried by Alderman Matt O'Shea of Benwich Ward.
19th. Come on.
And Michelle Smith of which ward?
Come on. 43.
He's a dork, ladies and gentlemen. Ben, your thoughts on this? Will this help curb any of this corruption?
I certainly hope so. Although Chicago, where there's a will, there's a way, and it always seems to be a way. But it seems as though at this moment in our history, Chicago is taking seriously the culture of political corruption that exists in this town and trying to deal with it. And then there's always these little minor flare-ups like the one, and I don't know. I don't know if it falls in the category of corruption, but the flare-up having to do with Fleisnergate and the fact that he had the two homeowner exemptions. I don't know if that's as bad as blatant. Should I give him some slack, D, and say it was a mistake?
Hell no.
Okay. All right, since you say so, I won't do it. All right, I'm just saying. But there is and then this other thing, the Bat Cave. We haven't talked about this yet, D. This is so Chicago, and this gets to the heart of Chicago. So, all right, the Bat Cave is an express lane that connects downtown Chicago to McCormick Place. I didn't even know it existed. It's a lane that's restricted to only a relative handful of people. The intention of it, according to what I read in the newspaper, is to make it easier for conventioneers to get from McCormick Place to the downtown. They're in an early hurry. So they keep regular traffic off this lane, and you could zip like your Christian Bale in Ford versus Ferrari. And it turns out that it's also available not just to conventioneers, but to people with clout. So old Fleisner, the lawyer for Lori Lightfoot, had access to the Bat Cave. For his condo in the South Loop. I don't think there's a Bat Cave connecting Naperville to downtown Chicago, but maybe there is. I just don't know about it. D. I didn't know about this other Bat Cave. Miles has entered the studio. Anyway, so there's this. So just the existence of the Bat Cave, and I think Rahm gave it the nickname the Bat Cave because it's enclosed. What a clever guy Rahm is, huh?
Oh, yeah.
He came up with that nickname. But just the existence of the Bat Cave just sort of symbolizes corruption in Chicago. It's not just the blatant corruption where you pay somebody off. It's that some people have an advantage that the overwhelming majority of people do not have. Like, nobody wants to sit in traffic all day. Nobody wants to have to be stuck behind a truck on Lakeshore Drive or the Kennedy. You wouldn't be stuck behind a truck on Lakeshore Drive. You wouldn't want to just waste your time idling in traffic. So those with clout, right on the Batcave, straight downtown. And it's very Chicago. It still exists, but Fleisner at least gave up his. I saw this. He no longer will have access to the Batcave. He voluntarily gave it up. So so that's how things go in Chicago. D. It's like the little signs of clout that bleed into the bigger aspects of corruption, where people think they are entitled to things that they're not really entitled to, and they think they can get away with rules because they're above the rules. To quote you, rules for thee, but not for me.
All right, shout out to Michael on the YouTube live stream chat. He's calling BS, Ben. He says you're making this Batcave crap up.
I wish I were. Batcave. It's in today's my bright one, or was it the Tribune? One or the other said that. Miles, have you heard about the Batcave?
Yeah, that's what Trump took when he was in town most recently, right, to avoid all the protests that kind of back way into the McCormick Center straight from the airport.
Did not know that.
It's basically so that you know all these elected officials and powerful people never have to face the public whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for it in today's Tribune or Sun-Times. There was a story about Fleisner giving up.
It speeds all these people back and forth between all these,
Well, the real question
organs.
Has Rahm ever ridden his bike in the Batcave?
You can't ride a bike in the Batcave.
Oh, he loves riding his bike.
I just biked around Lake Michigan.
Yeah, so whoever it was that was complaining, no, I'm telling you, there is a thing called a Batcave, and
we've never been in it. We don't get the insight.
I'm trying to look for the story. I think it was in the Tribune or the Sun. I can't remember. I read it in the train coming in. I was not on the Batcave. Who was saying that we made up the Batcave? What's his name? Michael. I was not on the Batcave. I've never been on the Batcave, so I have no personal experience of the Batcave, but. According to my beloved
the
papers.
Batcave's very real. You can see it from if you're like near the Art Institute and where there's the train yard there. I think there's a little bit of exposed.
Okay, I didn't. Well, things I'm learning. Anyway.
Did you find the article?
No, I didn't find it. We'll take a break and I'll find the article.
All right, so that's what's going on in Chicago and or Illinois this afternoon. Of course, we'll keep you posted on these stories as today's program rolls along. And with the new year comes a crap load of new laws in the state of Illinois. So many, in fact, it's a little overwhelming. But thanks to the recent work of our good friends at WTTW Chicago. I mean, I say good friends, but we really only know Mark Baser from the interview show. They seem pretty cool, though. But thanks to WTTW, we have a list of the laws that you should know. There's 20 of them. And today on the program, we'll go through, I don't know, maybe one or two. It's the 20 new laws of 2020 coming up later on in the Ben Joravsky Show. People, don't go anywhere. We're taking a short little break. And after that short little break, our good friend from In These Times magazine, Miles Kampf-Lassin, is back to talk progressive politics. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters. Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Ben, please stop talking about the Bulls. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Miles Kampf-Lassin in the studio. Another big Bulls fan. We're not allowed to talk about the Bulls, but they did win last night. How about that? Did you see that?
I didn't see it, but I heard it. OT thriller.
It was unbelievable. Even I had given up all hope, and they won it with half a second left.
Our fourth quarter crumbling Bulls have found some backbone, maybe.
I don't know. We after today's show, we'll be doing a roundtable about the Bulls, but not for a bonus feature. But we're not allowed to talk about them now, right, D?
You're damn right.
All right, we are allowed to talk about impeachment. And by the way, young Michael, was that his name?
Yeah.
I was looking at the wrong newspaper. Here it is, right here, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go.
City's top lawyer gives up Batcave Road pass. I was like gaslighting myself. I was like, I saw the article about the Batcave when I was coming in, but it's not in any of the newspapers. I thought it was in the Tribune, Miles, but I was looking at the Tribune and I couldn't find it. I was like, did I make it up?
Our host,
Am I
ladies
losing
and
my
gentlemen.
mind? Woo! And then I discovered I was looking at the wrong Tribune.
Well, hearing the paper shuffling does really make you understand how the real analog feel of this show.
I
You know, we're not cruising through any digital archives here.
I opened the show by reading this opus from young Johnny Cass from the 90s where he was defending the impeachment of Bill Clinton and urging everybody to vote for the impeachment of Bill Clinton on the grounds that he said morally offensive. We should impart these lessons to our children who'll be horrified to grow up with all these hypocrisies in their life. Of course, it's an absolute reverse of everything he's saying now. But to get to that article, somebody had sent it to me. I had to go on my phone. And that's even more precarious, Miles, than the newspaper, because my phone it goes out. I'm reading it, and all of a sudden it just goes dark. Anyway.
Oh, Miles, I'll have you know, I had the Popeyes chicken sandwich. I tried it.
Oh, you did? Tell
Yeah.
me about it.
Oh, it was great.
It's pretty good, right?
It was Saturday. It was like 4 p.m. I had plans. I ate it. Then next
Sounds
thing I
like
know,
chicken time to me.
Well, the next thing I know, I woke up. It was 10:30 at night. I passed out after eating the chicken sandwich.
Wow. Well,
Yeah, that was one of the highlights of the year. We should do a Miles highlight of the year. It was really, we had fun with it, but Miles, you're making a very compelling point about how Popeyes was rolling in the dough, but they weren't sharing it.
They
with
still
their
are, and
workers.
we see it, more again and again. There was this case recently where, there was an employee, I think it was in Texas, who brought their kid to work to deal with the deluge of customers, and that got on air, and the worker got fired. Understandably, we have child labor laws in this country, but no Popeyes, shareholders or administrators faced any responsibility for that, for the fact that they have not hired enough workers to deal with
I want to understand this. The worker brought in his kid to help.
Yeah, and so he was packaging sandwiches, and that got caught on footage. This young kid, 12 years old or something, which obviously you can't have. But the only person who got any consequences for that was the worker who was making minimum wage. Meanwhile, the profits just keep going up and up. So, the story is still with us.
Rules for thee, not for me. All right, I'm going to really resist the temptation to talk about Mark Flessner, the City Corporation Counsel, who had a property in Naperville and property in the South Loop, and move on to impeachment. Far greater crimes, far greater consequences for the country. While we were on the show yesterday and into the evening, the Congress voted to impeach Donald John Trump. Where it goes from here is anybody's guess, and we'll probably be talking about this. All kinds of experts, like how are the Democrats going to deal with this in the Senate? The chess game that's going to go on between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. David Ferris will be coming on the show tomorrow. This is his expertise, folks. Looking forward to that conversation. But what are your general thoughts on the impeachment?
Well, I think what we saw, I mean, obviously this is a huge, development in our nation's history. This is only the third president ever to be impeached. And in the response to it, I think really shows it's not just a partisan divide, but kind of how the different factions in Washington are dealing with the fact that we've got, a president right now who has been impeached over very serious crimes. And, earlier in the show, you were talking about, these crybaby Republicans, and it's certainly true in some cases. I mean, there's this guy, Barry Loudermilk. You probably saw the Georgia Republican who said Trump's being treated worse than Jesus, it's pretty excessive claim. But at the same time, I mean, the Democrats were very focused on treating this as a very somber affair, and they kept saying it's a sad day. It's what you kept hearing. And Nancy Pelosi dressed like she's going to a funeral. You saw this across the Democratic caucus, all these black outfits yesterday, and trying to say, this is a sad day. After the gavel came down, you saw some Democrats cheering, and Pelosi, now famously kind of gestured to them to stop, to keep this as serious as possible. And so they're not reveling in this, at least outwardly, which, that's how they're choosing to play this. Meanwhile, Trump was in Michigan yesterday, and he said, I hope you're having as good of a time as I am with this. It's not just deflecting. He's just embracing is saying, look, this is impeachment light. This isn't even a real thing. I'm going to keep on keeping on and, pander to the supporters. And he was just riffing. He was doing shtick. He was like talking about why people don't have water in their showers and just like making nonsensical claims. Very different from Bill Clinton, who you brought up earlier, who was apologized and obviously took it very seriously. There were 5 Democrats that voted to impeach Bill Clinton. Of course, no Republicans voted to impeach Donald Trump. Not even all Democrats did. So it's a very different kind of state of affairs now. I think that, partially because it was seen as a foregone conclusion, I think that the House was going to ultimately take this vote. But I mean, I'm looking at the headlines right now on your papers. This is a historic event in that he's impeached. The question of like how that's going to play out and the politics of it, I think, are going very differently than the Democrats probably expected them to go a few months ago.
Well, that's a valid point. I don't think the Democrats, and this is why Nancy Pelosi, among many reasons, she's so reluctant. She's a very cautious political player, very savvy chess player, and is always aware of like how one move affects another move, and very Michael Madigan-like in how she wants to protect each of her caucus members. Or you could say that Michael Madigan is very Nancy Pelosi-like in how he wants to protect his caucus members. So as soon as she came to the conclusion that politically she had no choice but to drive his impeachment for a couple of reasons. Number one, Trump was so freaking defiant in terms of his attitude toward Congress, his attitude toward laws. He continually asking foreign nations to interject themselves into the election process on his behalf. At some point, Democrats have to take a stand, or are they just going to let this guy just continue to walk all over them? So as soon as she made that move, Miles, you lose control. She lost control of things, because this is what I was getting at. I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't know, for instance, right now, at least before I went on the studio, it wasn't clear whether they were when they were going to actually send the matter over to the Senate for the Senate to have conduct the trial, and what the ground rules of the trial would be. It seems that even the Republicans are a little split on this, where Donald Trump, he wants to turn it into a real circus where he can bring in Hunter Biden's son, Joe Biden's son, Hunter, and put the focus on the Democrats. And then You're right. He embraces this moment as an opportunity to go on the road and do his shtick, and the longer that takes, the more court cases are going to be on issues like who has to testify, whether subpoenas will be honored, can be.
Well, in terms of the timeline, I agree. I think that we are in unknown territory. I mean, pretty much all of this could have been conceived or even preordained. The fact that we are going to see a Democratic majority who controls the House vote with their caucus, because clearly Nancy Pelosi was leading this charge to do this. The question now is what is going to happen next. Clearly, the Senate will vote to acquit him because the Republicans control the Senate. They have no reason to go against their president, who is incredibly popular amongst the Republican base. And Mitch McConnell has said he's not going to allow any witnesses to testify that the Democrats are demanding. These are people like John Bolton and even Rudy Giuliani. So in the face of that, that's what you heard Nancy Pelosi say. We're not going to send these articles to the Senate until we can get a fair trial. That, to me, I mean, there is a very strong case to be made, I see, of just, don't send them, because how are we going to, if we know what's going to happen in the Senate, we're just going to repeat what just happened in the House, where you have two different political parties arguing completely different in different worlds. If you watched Nunes or Jim Jordan yesterday during the debate on the floor, they were not grappling with the specifics of what Democrats are alleging that Trump did, and it's not even that they're defending the president. They're just saying, no, this is it's a partisan witch hunt. This is just Ukraine is Russia 2.0. They've been trying to reverse the Democratic mandate that the American people sent when they voted in Trump since his election in 2016. They'll never get over this. This is all it amounts to. They're trying to take away your voice as a voter, and they're going to keep saying that in the Senate. So it's not as if there will be any new, especially if no witnesses are allowed. I mean, in the Clinton trial, of course, there were witnesses. If McConnell will not allow any, what good does it do Democrats to actually have this? And from a lefty perspective, I'd say all that will mean is that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, the two leading senators, will be off of the trail. They won't be able to be campaigning in Iowa, in New Hampshire, anywhere. They'll have to be 6 days a week in U.S. Congress to go through this trial where we already know what's going to happen. So that could be part of the reason that, Pelosi is playing coy about when she's going to send them, because the whole thing was saying we want this to be a quick impeachment process. I think if that was true, they would send them now, but I just don't really see what the Democrats have to gain, especially now. You look at the polls, it's 48-48 about, impeach and remove. The country's as divided as ever. I don't think that the House inquiry really solved that.
Yeah. No. It absolutely did not solve that in any way. And that, again, I keep hammering the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. The one thing I will say about what impeachment has done, in my opinion anyway, is shredded any notion that there's bipartisanship in this country. Yeah. And now there's still some Democrats who preach it. And tonight we'll be talking about the debates. I guarantee you, some Democrat on that stage, whether it's Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar. Is Amy Klobuchar on the stage? I can't remember. Yeah, we'll talk about the need for bipartisanship, even though it doesn't exist in any real way. But the two diametrically opposed positions that the Republicans and Democrats have taken on impeachment show that there really is no meeting of the minds whatsoever. There's you're right. The Republicans are having a party. Donald Trump's having a party in Michigan, and the Democrats are wearing black and very somber about this. It's like they're two separate planets.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's just going to continue in the Senate. I cannot imagine there would be any, people will say, oh, Susan Collins or Mitt Romney, there's going to be some of these moderates that are going to pull off. There's no, there's no reason or indicator to believe that either of them would vote to convict this president right now. So I don't see what the, political benefit is. And understandably, I mean, the focus has been, this is principle. This is about, this president has violated the Constitution. We have to hold him to account. I understand that. And I feel like that's, what most Americans who believe in the rule of law and believe, we are a country of, processes and everything would buy into. But then at the same time, I mean, there's so many things that he could have been impeached for that they didn't include in these articles of impeachment. The articles were so narrow that they focused wholly on Ukraine, which understandably for folks like you and I, we see how clearly this was a betrayal of, the oath of office. But most people are not moved by withholding military aid to a country. And so if you just keep going on those issues in the Senate, when most people care about, a litany of Trump's other crimes, or they care about popular demands like higher wages and more money for education and universal health care, if all the debate is just stuck about arguing over Ukraine, which most voters don't feel, reflects their interests, I don't see how that helps to advance, a progressive politics in this country or a democratic agenda.
Well, you're starting to sound like your partner in crime, Micah, was on the show yesterday, and we had a great debate between Micah and Monroe on impeachment, and Micah was articulating a standard leftist point of view that this doesn't help the Democrats in the election. I actually disagree with him. I think it does. It puts a spotlight on Donald Trump, and I think Donald Trump, one way or another, will be the chief issue in the 2016 election.
I agree, but I do think that the question about whether we're talking about Donald Trump's relationship to working people in this country versus his legitimacy as a president is very where there will be a divide. And if we're focusing on the latter, which is whether he's corrupt, whether he's he's somehow illegitimate, the Republicans are going to seize on that and say exactly what they've been saying in the House, which is that the Democrats are trying to relitigate 2016. They're trying to take away the Democratic mandate, which I know we're very different countries, but what you saw happen in the UK with the defeat of the Labour Party, I think, was that the Tories, the Conservatives, very deftly and successfully employed that same type of argument about having another referendum over Brexit by saying, look, you all voted for this. They want to redo that. They want to take away your voice. And I think that was a strong reason that people really abandoned the Labour Party. I think if the Democrats are running strictly on, we got to take this president out, versus we have to defeat him because he's betrayed working people on issue after issue, I think it's going to be a harder case to be made.
I'll draw a big distinction. There was no mandate in the 2016 election. And this is my point I've been raising ever since. Donald Trump didn't even win the popular vote. It was a divided vote. And if there was any honesty in the way we run politics, they would have treated it as a divided vote. And there would have been much more respect toward bipartisan issues. Instead, Donald Trump ruled, and George Bush did the same thing in 2001 when he took office. Again, he didn't win the popular vote either. He ruled as though the election was a mandate. The election was not a mandate, and so he stuffed. All his nominees are pushing through like this hardcore Republican agenda, including hammering away at health care and union rights. In fact, to your point, yesterday, lost in the impeachment was a court ruling that upheld a lower court's ruling overturning Obamacare. People are facing a serious crisis in this country about health care. Donald Trump's Justice Department is defending the effort to undo Obamacare. And you're right. So to a certain degree, impeachment is a distraction from that very real issue. So the challenge is for the Democrats to point both things out.
To refocus, I think that that's true. I mean, this appeals court ruled against the individual mandate and the ACA. This goes to the heart of the Affordable Care Act. If that is, carried out, then that will dismantle this entire project. And I think that that is a key point that people should be debating, and because everything you hear from Joe Biden is we got to protect and expand Obamacare. Well, if the individual mandate is taken away, which it looks like it's going to be, then we can't just start from there. You need to reapproach how you deal with healthcare in America. And I will just say, pivoting to the debate, the reason I think that it's important that would not let impeachment eclipse other issues is because the Democrats agree. Like, the last debate, you had 15 minutes to start out the debate talking about impeachment, but they all basically said the same thing, that this president deserves to be impeached. If that's true, then maybe the debate should be about other things. Otherwise, it's just a place to, have somebody on as like a pundit, to say what their opinion is. But if they're not disagreeing with one another, then I don't see how that advances the argument or clarifies the differences between the candidates, which should really be the role of these debates.
All right, one candidate who will not be on the stage tonight is Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman from Hawaii. She voted present on the impeachment vote yesterday. What's your thoughts? I have some strong opinions in that, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are about Tulsi Gabbard voting present.
Well, one person that spoke out about this, and I mentioned this to you before, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who clearly supported impeachment and voted for it. And she said, "Look, this does not. You got to vote. You got to take a stand. Either vote for it or vote against it. Voting president seems like under that situation. She's running for president. She's kind of the outsider candidate in many ways, or is trying to take on that mantle. This seems like maybe a ploy to get some attention in that way." I saw an interview with her this morning explaining it, and what she said is, somebody has to take a stand for the center. To me, I feel like that's, I don't know what the center would vote present. I don't know. I don't know if that's really, computes for how if you're trying to speak for some type of unspoken for community that has views on impeachment. I think most people, as I said, in Iowa, less than 6% of people say impeachment is their number one concern. And across the country, these candidates are going and campaigning, and the voters are not talking about impeachment. They're talking about their daily lives, their concerns, and everything. So I understand, kind of what she's trying to get at in a way, and saying like this should not be what we're all focusing on. But by voting present, she's not really taking a stand. She said she can't vote against it because the president's a criminal, but she can't vote for it because it's just this partisan gridlock. Well, I do personally think that impeachment is kind of meant to be partisan in a way, because if it was not partisan, there would be other ways in which to hold a president to account. But because of the nature of our, weird democratic system in the Senate, we have, representatives who have to carry out democratic mandates, but yet are elected only by small minorities. And it's very difficult to find any logical way to deal with impeachment processes. So I don't think that argument on her part totally makes sense, because there is partisan divide, obviously, and her voting present, I don't think did anything to lessen that divide.
Well, my next guest, Jeff Johnson, is standing right here, and I'm looking forward to having a little discussion with Jeff about voting present as a. It is so weak. I mean, whenever anybody in Springfield votes present on a measure, everybody laughs at them. Are you kidding me?
You remember that was a huge talking point against Obama when he was running for Senate initially, was all of when his state Senate present votes, and then later when he was running for president. So this is
it's weak sauce, man. Bring it one way or the other. Take a stand. Well, I don't know. I mean, just take a stand. Vote no. You don't think he should be impeached? Say it.
Well, the other thing that she's done now is she did just introduce these censure measures in the House as well.
That's weak sauce too, man. God, that's even weaker than voting present. I mean, censure. Are you kidding me?
No, so she's already introduced that, and that's her, that's kind of her tack that she's taking on this. But as you said, she's not going to be on the debate stage. So, all the people on there already support impeachment, obviously. So it kind of seems like, understandably, we want to acknowledge that this happened. This is a massive, development in our country's history. It'll be written in the history books. It'll always be, a tag around Donald Trump's neck as a president that he was impeached. But in terms of actually pushing back on the type of really retrograde and regressive, deeply far-right policies that he's pushing and that he's carrying out, both through, whether it's tax cuts, whether it's judges, or whether it's, this horrible immigration state he's funneling money into. There's plenty of ways that this president is, I think, betraying his oath of office that he, got elected to do, even though it was not by a majority of citizens. And yet the singular focus on impeachment can, I think, detract from these other larger fights and detract from putting forward a positive platform. I mean, one of the good things that the Democratic House has done is voted forward this $15 minimum wage, but you never hear about that. You don't have Democrats making as big of an issue out of we need to pay American workers $15 an hour across the board. I think that's a much stronger message to come out of ahead of these 2020 elections by saying, look, this is what we're putting our energy into right now. And I think that would just breed more success, because then people think, oh, these people are standing up for me, rather than just they're fighting. Because I think the right will always win that. When people look at the political system and they think, oh, it's corrupt, the right is way more adept at being able to take advantage of that, and Trump is possibly the best person at turning it into a game of saying, I'm the only honest one. These people are all corrupt. They're all in the swamp. They're all fighting with one another. So I think the more you get into that fight, the more you cede ground. That's my concern. It's not even that, I think that's the way to, take the country far to the left. I just think that's the only way that you're going to actually come out of this fight without, some losses under your belt. And that's definitely a concern, considering the fact that I think that I know the hope was for Democrats that through this impeachment process, the public testimony in the House, you'd see these poll numbers change and you'd see more and more people come on board onto impeachment and removal. And that just hasn't happened.
Okay. There's two issues. There's the political issue, which is what you were getting at, that Democrats would hope that impeachment would be a weapon to work against Donald Trump. And then I take very seriously this issue. I may be the only person in this room who takes it seriously, but the contempt with which Donald Trump has treated Congress is a violation of the separation of powers. And if you allow your president just to put two middle fingers up in the air every step of the way, then you're just saying, why even have a Congress? If the Congress is subpoenaing witnesses and he says, no, you don't have to answer those subpoenas. If Congress is subpoenaing reports or insider, no, then why? You have no authority. You're just a rubber stamp. You're like the Chicago City Council. And I don't know if the Chicago City Council is a model we should follow in Washington. I'm interested in what Jeff Johnson has to say about that. I mean, they do pass things, but some of the things they pass we don't want. And you do want discussion. Like I thought yesterday, I'll probably be talking about this with Jeff, but yesterday's reefer revolt resulted in a promise, a commitment to have more minorities get a piece of the reefer pie when it becomes legal. So you could say a little debate, a little dissension, force the city to change its policies. It's a good, healthy thing, discussion and debate. But if you have a president of the United States who just consistently says to Congress, I don't have to abide by anything you say, then we don't really have a democracy. So I take that as a very serious challenge to our democracy, and I'm really disappointed. And I know this sounds naive, but I'll say it anyway. I'm disappointed with conservatives who should be upholding these traditions. Listen, Clinton committed perjury. Do you take perjury serious? I mean, that's a real important question, and the Republicans had a valid point on that. Now you could say, well, the perjury Bill Clinton committed back in the 1990s had nothing to do with being president. It was dragged out of him, out of all these ceaseless every argument that the Republicans are making about what the Democrats are doing to Clinton, to Trump, could have been made in the 90s. But perjury is perjury. So you have to take. Don't you agree with me that you have to?
I agree with you. I think that the question for me is more how politics is a game of power, and how are you going to influence? And by doing this, it's not just symbolic. Obviously, this is a real. They've passed impeachment. Donald Trump has been officially impeached, and one of the reasons was, he was abusing his power, and he was, not sending any witnesses to Congress, and he was not following the orders of Congress. That is a way to hold somebody accountable, and yet it doesn't change anything because there's still no witnesses that are going to testify in the Senate. So in the equilibrium of power, the right is still winning. So the only way you're going to actually take away the power from these Republicans, I think we can be disappointed in them all we want, but Mitch McConnell said when Obama was elected, his number one goal was to make him a one-term president, and he refused to have hearings for Merrick Garland. These Republicans are playing serious when it comes to power, and when Democrats say, I wish you would follow the norms more, they're not actually taking power back from the Republicans, and they're not putting the country on a different trajectory. And the only way to do that is to get Trump out of office and have a mandate for a very different direction. I think that longer goal is what has to be the North Star, not just how are we going to, have this president reckon with his crimes, because he's not reckoning with it. He's bragging about them
getting away with
in
it.
Michigan.
Yeah.
So that's very different. And, Democrats, it's difficult because they just voted for this National Defense Authorization Act, which was a huge military budget giveaway. 188 Democrats in the House supported it. They also just made a deal with Trump on NAFTA 2.0. So on these other issues, it doesn't seem as if this president is such a singularly villainous entity. He's also somebody that they're making deals with and passing budgets for. So it's harder to have it both ways. I think it's much stronger when you just say, look, the president has a very different vision for the country than what we want to see, and we are going to say exactly the things we're going to do, whether that's instituting universal health care or canceling student debt, things that are going to impact people's lives in a way that they don't see what is happening on Congress right now impacting their lives.
All right, very good, Miles. Appreciate it very much. We got Jeff Johnson on deck. We're going to bring him on. Have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you very
Miles,
much.
where can people follow you and find
Yes.
you? Talk about your latest work.
Yeah, inthesetimes.com. You can find me on Twitter at Miles K. Lassin. Please follow my work, and hopefully everybody can get engaged in the political process. This is going to be, the holidays obviously is a time people be with their families and everything. As soon as the holidays are over, our primary here is March 17th. So there's not much time before, we're actually going to be selecting a new nominee for president.
Absolutely. Debates tonight. I mean, if you're a political junkie, and everybody in this room is a political junkie, this this is feeding time coming up the next few weeks. All right, Miles, have a great Merry Christmas, as I said. Jeff Johnson's on deck. We'll bring him on when we come back. Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them: ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit AdmiralX.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
The same goals that we have in the contract currently is what they put in writing. That's insufficient. Number two, the same class size committee that's currently in the contract is what she put in writing. That's insufficient. And they have not committed a dollar amount to lowering class sizes. There are 1,300 oversized classrooms in the city of Chicago right now. If you go on the south side to Chatham, there are almost 40 students in a kindergarten classroom. If you go to the 10th Ward on the southeast side of town, you can go in a classroom with 36 kids in a kindergarten classroom. And you know what's even more offensive this morning is that they have nurses coming into our schools on tomorrow to be with students, but she cannot put a nursing ratio in a contract. This is not a joke, people. This team, our team of 40, we have been asking, begging, organizing, demanding the same things for the last 10 years. And she should know because her team, her campaign team, copy and pasted every single demand that we've put forth for the last 10 years into a campaign platform. She has given speech after speech about resourcing neighborhood schools, providing nurses and librarians, and yet we're standing.
All right, everybody, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, December 19th is just moments away. But before we get into this, we need to thank the following unions once again for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace, not Aerosmith Workers, Local 126 and District 8. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course today's Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, December 19th is brought to you in part by our dear friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2, let's go. It is Thursday, December 19th. And live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, we're talking impeachment, pensions, and so much more with Union Man Jeff Johnson and its Cook County Commissioner, Brandon Johnson. Now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Vinny J. Ben Joravsky.
A lot of Johnsons in the studio.
I watch it, buddy.
Sorry.
It's all good. All good.
A lot of Johnsons in the studio today. Jeff Johnson in here.
Keep it clean.
Our pension. I know. That's what, I couldn't look at him. We have a lot of pension talk to do. We have a lot of political talk. When I was asking questions of Miles, I was looking at Jeff going, Jeff, this is coming to you next because before I kick it to you, the whole notion of like Tulsi Gabbard voting present, what a wimp move.
If you
oh my God,
pick a side, right?
Pick a side.
Yeah, that's it's a weak move. I've always thought that was weak, and contentious or not, you're voted or you're elected to make these decisions.
Well, before we go to the to what update Dennis have, I have to say this: in the state house, that's where it's a big issue, and we don't have to focus in Chicago what's going down in the state house. So state reps and senators realize that they could probably get away with stuff that an alderman can't get away with because everybody's watching when the aldermen vote.
Yeah, true. But in the state house, a lot of times they don't even vote for themselves. It's dictated to them.
So the person's got a tough vote. They're worried about a mailing. If they vote yes on it, like an abortion bill or something, it could be hammered against them one way or the other. So they vote present. Nobody's fooled.
Exactly.
So. Anyway, Tulsi Gabbard, man, I was like, come on, take a stand. Don't vote present. Anyway, D, what's your update before we go to Jeff?
All right, people, the holidays are on the way. The decade is coming to a close. The year 2020 is right around the corner. And unlike the last governor in Illinois, the current guy running things may have carpal tunnel from signing so much legislation into law. Yeah, carpal tunnel jokes right here on the Ben Joravsky Show, and only on the Ben Joravsky Show. But seriously, thanks to Governor J.B. Pritzker, there are a ton of new laws coming to Illinois in 2020. More than 250, in fact. Holy cow. And thanks to WTTW Chicago, we have a narrowed list of 20 new laws, and one by one we are going to find out all 20 of these throughout the holiday season. It's time for our first new law. That's right. People, get ready. Gather around the fire. It's our holiday special. Please don't break out the weed yet, at least for another 13 days, as we begin.
It's not legal yet.
As we begin the 20 new laws of 2020.
That's correct.
And With the sleigh bells.
Yeah.
It's holiday special,
It's
you know
really
what I mean?
good.
Our first new law in 2020 involves education, and mainly teaching Illinois history. Starting with the 2020-2021 school year, that was hard, All-American history courses in Illinois must include the history of the Prairie State. Teaching our future leaders their state's history is a major step.
So, how many governors have gone to jail?
All right, well,
Pop
maybe not
quiz.
that part. We probably won't cover that part.
Sorry.
Like Abraham Lincoln stuff, the hat.
Okay.
Okay.
How many elected officials have been indicted?
This is a quote from Senator L.G. Sims Jr. Teaching our future leaders their state's history is a major step toward a better Illinois. Let's see here. It is important that our students learn how our state got to this point so they can get a deeper understanding of society and hopefully join the process of improving Illinois.
Oh, my God.
It's our first new law.
I think Jeff's attitude pretty much sums my.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the problem. In all seriousness, if you're going to teach the history of Illinois, you're going to run into problems if you're a teacher because immediately there's going to be different opinions about different figures in Illinois history.
Exactly. So, if you're in downstate,
Alton.
teaching or Illinois politics, you're going to have a different view, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be all like the ripping Chicago politicians.
Exactly. Yeah, they're the problem.
Yeah, they're the problem. Like there's no one from downstate who ever did anything corrupt in his life.
Exactly.
I think Paul Powell's from downstate. This is way before anybody's time. He was the Secretary of State. This is before you were born. So
The current one's from Alton.
That's correct, Senator. He was born there, Jesse White. But Paul Powell is the one. When he died, they found shoe boxes filled with cash. So that should be a chapter in itself.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, how do you deal with Blagojevich? The impeachment of Blagojevich. I can make a compelling argument that Blagojevich was as unfairly treated as Donald John Trump.
Didn't take a dime.
Didn't take a dime.
We got 14 years.
He got 14 years.
Yeah, there's people taking money getting less time.
So, how do you teach Blagojevich? Here's a question, an ethical question. By purging ourselves of Rod Blagojevich, did we clean up Illinois politics, or we were just hypocritical? That would be a good a discussion question. And I'm sure if I did that discussion question, some kid would tell his or her parent, some parent would get offended, call the principal.
Exactly.
I get called in.
Yeah, because it's not cut or dry, right? So it goes back to the partisan aspect of half of them's on one side, half of them on the other, and they're not going to agree on it.
Yeah, so that's a challenge. But besides, I don't know, what would you accentuate in the history of Illinois? So you know what I mean? Who settled Illinois?
Yeah.
Where was Illinois in the Civil War?
What presidents came from Illinois?
Yeah. Can we name? How many?
If I had to guess, 2.
And those 2 would be
Grant and Lincoln.
Wow. No, that's
correct.
Oh no,
damn it.
Lincoln is from Kentucky, and Grant is from Illinois.
Grant's from Illinois.
Ronald
Reagan. That's it. I get 50%. I got a 50 on that.
50% of my class. That's a B. I'm an easy grader, man.
1 down, 19 more to go.
Jesus Christ.
It's the 20 new laws of 2020 in Illinois, all throughout this holiday season.
Yeah, but I'll give you Lincoln because even though he was born in Kentucky,
no, you're right though.
Yeah, he's from he was a lawyer.
Land of Lincoln.
Land of Lincoln. So people forget that Ronald W. Reagan was.
Yeah, exactly.
He was. What town was it? I can't remember the name of the town. Anyway, all right. Yes, I'm looking forward to. And by the way, no prep at all, Jeff. He just throws these bills at me. I'm
Random stuff.
Okay. It's a good thing I'm Rain Man.
I remember they passing that.
I actually do not remember that one passing at all.
No.
But it is one of those things. It probably sounded like a good idea at the time.
At the time,
now some poor teacher has got an unfunded mandate.
And it's got to create a syllabus for teaching Illinois, history of Illinois.
History of Illinois. Just add that to the list of things.
Asian carp next.
All right. So another point that emerged from our discussion with Miles about impeachment, in addition to the voting president, I think we all agree that was a weak sauce, as they say in basketball. Come on, Tulsa, you're better than that. Just take a stand. Is the whole notion of bipartisanship. That is, Jeff, in my humble opinion, so outdated. Somebody was explaining to me.
What do you mean? What do you mean it's outdated?
Well, okay, this is what I mean. I was talking about how Barack Obama was always appealing to people's the better parts of people, talking about working with Republicans and Democrats. And someone explained to me, who was even older than I am, with such a thing as possible, that Barack Obama came out of an Illinois politics where Democrats did work with Republicans. James R. Thompson was a Republican governor of Illinois when you were a kid in growing up, who worked with Democrats all the time to pass public works bill. George Ryan went to federal prison, but before he did that, he was very much in the spirit of bipartisanship, always working with the Democrats.
What about Edgar?
Edgar? He's at the top of the list.
He's at the top of the list. Yeah.
3 Republicans. You can't find a Republican like them in the national politics right now, and you can't find any really like them in local politics anymore. And yet, when Barack Obama was coming of age, they were the leaders of the Republican Party. And so this explanation was given to me. That shaped Barack Obama's worldview, that Republicans will work with Democrats.
So I did an event with Governor Edgar, and the night before we met up, and he talked about, he goes, Jeff, I'm a Republican. I'm like, I know that. He goes, but back when I was governor, I was more, he goes, by today's standards, I'm considered a Democrat. He goes, I worked across the aisle. He goes, I recognized that unions and the positive impact that they had. He goes, I worked with people across the state. And he goes, nowadays, in today's partisan, he goes, I couldn't be a politician. And, it goes to, and I think that, you say that Obama was kind of along those lines. I think that he might have had that goal, but I don't think he really fulfilled it. Because if you look, a lot of people say for 8 years he was a lame duck president. And, to say that, there was other outlaying issues that maybe created, like how he didn't get much done. But from Illinois, right, when you look at Bush openly gave to Texas. And when asked why, because I'm from Texas, you idiot. And almost to the point where Obama was like, Illinois, like, I don't want to get painted with the brush of taking care of Illinois. And in the bipartisan aspect of things, it just really grew divided. And I think you can see kind of that, the tipping point, to a point where, our nation became so partisan now, and we're just worse off now as it is. So, I could see the saying he came from that era, but I don't think was productive in the sense that of your Thompsons, your Edgars, where they knew how to make deals, reach across the aisle, shake hands, and, you walk away with 80% of what you want. I walk away with 80% of what I want. Yeah. And we both walk away with a deal.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Sue Sedlowski Garza, the alderwoman from the 10th Ward, at the start of the teacher strike, saying that nobody's going to get everything that they want out of this, and nobody should get everything. But they were, and she was, by the way, she turned out to be right. Nobody got everything they wanted, but a deal was reached, and the teachers came off a strike. I'm going to defend Obama on this front. I've been going through this assessment of Obama where I've been critical of him in my mind, been reading a lot of books, Jeff, about the early Obama days. He attempted, in my humble opinion, those first few years to be bipartisan, and he got no help or assistance from the Republican. His Obamacare was basically Mitt Romney's plan that Mitt Romney put through in Massachusetts. It was not what the lefties of the party wanted, and he distanced the lefties of the party from the process. He reached out. He had a very Republican-style plan, and he was rejected by the Republicans.
But I think if you look at his history, and I say this now, and I mean no disrespect, but he wasn't very much of a experienced legislator.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Through his career, right? And so the art of making deals, right? That's what politics is, the art of making deals. And he had this skyrocketing career where if you look at his history of like, okay, well, what major bills did he contribute to? It's so he was a new politician and basically skyrocketed to president.
All right, speaking of the art of making deals, let's get a little local for the moment before I make you explain pension stuff to us. What's your thoughts about we had a field day with this yesterday, the Great Reefer Revolt. Where
the art of making deals,
art
exactly.
of making deals.
Yeah.
That's what was on full display at the Chicago City Council yesterday. The Black Caucus threatened to delay the implementation of the legalization law for 6 months until July, until they got a promise from Lori Lightfoot, an assurance that in the next round, at the very least, there'll be black entrepreneurs.
And what about the issue of, the governor promised, and then the governor's spokesman comes out and Jordan says, I don't really think we said that. Wait a minute, hold on.
See, this is why when the teachers went on strike and we'd have debates in the studio, and you were not one of the guys that was, the mayor's defenders would say, Ben, the mayor said she's going to hire those nurses and she's going to hire those psychologists and what have you. And I said, if it's not in writing,
yeah, exactly,
it's got to be in writing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
If it's not written, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
And the debates, you can see where, the one person's a lawyer, and you totally saw that.
You're talking about Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, full display. And, it's, not, I'm not even saying not knowing the parliamentary maneuvers and everything like that, but it was a matter of, wait, I get to talk. No, you don't. Mm-hmm. But no, and 4 votes later. And by the time, and what's funny is 2 points. And I'll start with the one that struck me as odd. When they were talking about the parliamentary aspect of like, wait, no, so if we do this, this happens, or wait, this vote won't be this. The one person in that entire galley that knew more than everybody and that could have easily said, okay, A, B, C, D, sat there and didn't say a word.
You talk about the alderman of the 14th Ward?
That is correct. That's
correct.
Yep. The senior member of the council.
Yeah.
And he was in the background just sitting there. He knew the answer. But to tell you how politics have changed in Chicago and where his role has turned into, he didn't say a word. Yeah. And they're arguing about like, well, if we vote yes for this, but no, but I can shut the vote and we can adjourn, but not the, And he's just sitting there and never said a word. Yeah. And it kind of tells you where he's at right now, and that stuck out to me as something very interesting from just a historical aspect. Yeah. But I get the African American caucus. I get what they were trying for, but to me, that should have kind of been addressed prior when they did the recreation or the medicinal licensing aspect of things. Like that's when you put your hooks into it then. But
nobody was paying attention.
Exactly.
By the way, before I move on, I have to ask you this question. This is a question that I have had great delight with. Fleissner, the Corporation Counsel for Lightfoot, it turns out that he has the home in Naperville and the condo in the South Loop. Okay, all right, we've already dealt with that. He's had the homeowner's exemption of 1. The homeowner said, okay, you made a mistake, Jeff, all right? That's why you have erasers on the pencils, okay? I didn't know that you could only claim.
I use a pen.
Okay, use a pen, all right.
What's the question?
All right, here's the question. I've put this question to everybody. Now, it turns out that Sun-Times, let's give the Sun-Times a shout-out. Tommy Schuba, the reporter, did a deep dive and discovered that Fleissner voted in Naperville in the Republican primary of 2018. If you recall, Jeff Johnson, he could have chose between Bruce Rauner and Jeannie Ives. In your humble opinion, who did Mark Fleissner vote for, Jeannie Ives or Bruce Rauner?
Bruce Rauner, 100%.
Why do you say that?
Northbrook. Yeah, that's the Bruce Rauner foothold. That's the
Naperville.
Naperville. Yeah, there you go, Naperville.
You can
Northbrook.
tell this guy's in Chicago.
Yeah, Naperville, Northbrook. It's outside of the city. Who cares? But no, Jeannie Ives was way farther south. She had that foothold south. No.
I would put my money on Rauner too. Corporate lawyer. He's probably pals with the guy.
Well, here's my question: do you whack him for the violation?
What do you mean?
For the two...
Oh, do you fire him?
Yeah.
Well, let me put it to you. I'll answer your question with a question.
Oh,
Let's say he was an electrician who worked for the city of Chicago, and they discovered
that... doesn't answer the question.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
You violated the residency requirement,
violated residency
and teachers are getting fired, and they got investigators. I mean, I remember when I forget the dude's name, but he worked for the Streets and Sanitation Department, and he was a pain in the neck gadfly to Mayor Daley, and they
the water department guy, right?
Water department, and they said he had a house in.
I'm blanking out his name.
I think his first name was Pat. It doesn't matter. They said he had a house in the suburbs, and he had an apartment in Uptown, and they did this huge investigation, and they had him. They thought they had him. They had investigators, Jeff, like outside his house looking to see when he came in. But Frank Avila, who was his lawyer, said he on the cross. He said to the investigators, "Did you have any staked in the alley?" And they go, "No." Well, then you can't say for certain that he didn't come into the apartment to habita. And, you know, so Frank Avila.
But here's the other thing, too, is this isn't the first residency issue in her administration.
That is correct.
You know, so, I mean, you know, trying to, you know, have a more of a diverse employment aspect, but you're going to the suburbs a little much here for some of your employment aspects.
Listen, man, if you tell me that this guy's the smartest lawyer in the world and the most brilliant guy, and the city would fall apart without his brilliance enlightening the mayor, well, that's a compelling argument.
Exactly.
There's a lot of lawyers in the city of Chicago.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And many of them are Democrats, I might add. Did not vote for Bruce Rauner or Jeannie.
Or Jeannie.
All right, but I think you're right. He just sounds like a Bruce Rauner type of guy. All right, now here's a question. You're our pension question, man. This came in between the. Somebody emailed me and wanted to know. They heard you on the show, and they wanted to know the issue for aldermen. When are aldermen eligible to draw city pensions? How long do they have to be aldermen? Go.
Good question. So aldermen prior to 2011, if you were elected alderman prior to 2011, you could pay into the aldermanic plan where for a regular city employee, you pay 8.5% of your check. For the aldermanic plan, you can pay basically 12% of your check. And at 20 years, you max out. So at 20 years, you can retire with a pension.
A full pension.
A full pension.
And what would that be?
80% of right now, aldermanic salary is about $118,000. So you get 80% of that after 20 years. And the thinking was that's basically 5 elections. So if I can survive 5 elections, 5 go-arounds, and that's why it's somewhat of the accelerated pace. The interesting point that some of these aldermen, when they get elected, they don't know. We try and tell them. If you're elected after 2011, because there was a big wave of after 2011s, and they're tier 2. They are in the same pension plan as every other city employee hired after 2011. They have to work till they're 67. They have to do 40 years or whatever it is. And, yeah, basically they cannot draw a pension until they're 67.
I got you. And so even if they're defeated as an alderman, they don't run for re-election, but they get another job. They have to get another job. They have to have that other job until they have to be 67 years old, just whether they're working or not.
Whether they're working or not, exactly, yeah.
Anyway, so it's 80%. Okay, I think that answers the person. I forget who it is. Because the question had to do, I think I told you it was Danny Solis, who was the alderman for many years of the 25th Ward. And
yeah, the interesting thing about that is, and like for the Muni Fund, the only way you lose your pension is if it is committing a felony in relation to your job. So if you're committed of a felony and, like, you know, I strangle you, well, it's not related to my job per se, so I don't lose my pension. But if it's something, yeah, exactly. But if you
don't strangle back,
he's tempted sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Answer a question with a question. Yeah. So, like, if you're a fireman and you hack somebody up with a saw, well, did you learn that? Learning how to use a saw on the job. Well, they can kind of tie that together. But no, all in all, it's if you commit a felony in relation to your job. And we've had a couple since I've been on the board where it's like, well, no, it's clear, direct, felony related to the job. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with some of our elected officials, because if it's related to their job, bye-bye pension.
Well, I'm thinking about Danny Solis, and that leads me to the next question. There was another question where I just remembered that someone asked, and I didn't know the answer to it, so it's a pension-related question, an Eddie Johnson pension-related question. But before I get to that, so Danny Solis, as far as I know, has never been charged with any crime. Yeah. There was an investigation into him, and then he became a cooperating witness. So my read, based on what you said, is that he should be eligible for his pension.
Yeah.
He's never been charged with a crime.
Right now, he's not charged with anything. Yeah, and he is. I don't know if he's applied for his pension or not, so I don't know if he's drawing or not. To be quite honest.
Well, and I would make the argument, at the risk of offending all my anti-Danny Solis listeners, that he probably did as much as anybody to quote unquote and I have it in quotes, clean up Chicago politics by wearing the wire on Burke. I mean, you can make the argument, you know.
I don't know if you're gonna, put a street for him in the 25th ward yet or not. I don't know about that, but
you could make that argument. Who was in the movie? I always forget it. The guy who became a former. Oh, it was a great flick. I forgot it the last time I referred to the movie.
Which movie?
Johnny Depp and
Donnie Brasco.
Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
Wasn't for Donnie Brasco, you know what I'm saying?
True. Yeah.
Who was in a movie with Depp? There was two.
Johnny Depp, Al Pacino.
De Niro or Pacino?
No, Pacino.
Oh, was it Pacino?
Yeah.
Pacino was the one that he betrayed.
Yeah, he betrayed Pacino. I love Pacino. All right. Anyway, so the Eddie Johnson question is this. Okay, Eddie Johnson, of course, a long time police officer in the city of Chicago.
Correct.
He was police chief. He retired. He gets some kind of pension.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, but I don't know how many years he was on the job.
Roughly 29 or 30. He was right around 29 or 30.
So how many years do you have before you max out with a police?
Police, you need 29 in a day. So 29 years in a day. And, your last 8 years, it's your highest 4 in a row. Mm-hmm. So he was trying to hold on for the last 4 years as the superintendent pay. And I think he just came up short of that because that's the whole reason he wanted to go in April. He was going to have that final 4 years. But all in all, what they do is your last 48 checks, right? So, your last 4 years of checks, they just average it out. If you make 2,000, 2,000, 5,000, 6,000, it just averages out over 48 checks. The interesting part of the story, and like most people forgot about this, is that when you're promoted to some chief for the police department, you leave the city at your highest career rank. So your highest union rank. Say, for example, he was a captain. Captain. He gets bumped up. He is the superintendent. She goes, I'm firing you.
Yes. That's
okay.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, that's cool. You're going to fire me. Tomorrow I'm a captain. Where do I go to be captain at? Because the only way you can get fired is by the police board.
Yeah.
So you can't fire somebody like a police officer like that. So you can demote him. And it's a slap on the hand, and, it's more of a, what do I do, stuff like that. So most of them just go, all right, screw it, I'm going to retire. But, yeah, she can't just outright fire him. He just, goes back down to his career service rank.
I gotcha. And, but he had retired anyway, so he's left. And so here was the question somebody asked me, and I don't know if it's even fair to put you in the spot this way.
Try me.
Since she fired him, and claims that he did not tell her the truth about what he was up to. Mm-hmm. Could that jeopardize his pension? This
no,
is
and so that is an old, I'll say wives' tale, but an old myth is that if you're under investigation for something, whatever the stupid thing you did, quit before you're fired so you don't lose your pension. And that's the old myth out there as far as do that. Goes back to what I just said. The only way you can lose your pension is if you commit a felony in relation to your job. So if I fire Ben Joravsky and Ben Joravsky's got 30 years on the job and, he was sleeping at the job or mouthed off to the boss, whichever one you want to take. You take that termination paper into the pension fund and go, all right, I got terminated because we need a retirement letter, a termination letter. We need something. All right, I got terminated. All right, Mr. Joravsky, you have 30 years. Here's your pension. So that is that's kind of how it works. But it's this old, and like city workers all across the city were like, oh, if somebody's under hey, we're going to fire you. And like managers would tell you like, oh, just, quit before you're fired so you don't lose your pension. No, you don't.
Wow, it's bad advice.
Yeah, it's bad advice. So
I would tell you, this is just my opinion, that would really be bad form to take away Eddie Johnson's pension. I'm glad to hear it's not going to happen. The man
for a non-work related issue.
Yeah, that's my humble opinion.
Yeah.
And I also feel that he did a service for the city of Chicago. He was put in a very tough position when Rahm threw him in the middle of that, and it's so.
Yeah, I
to treat
think-
him that way, I just don't.
And
I think it's the right
somebody
thing
had
to do.
said this from this building, actually. I was talking to him about Eddie Johnson. And he goes, if Eddie Johnson had just retired 3 months ago, and just walked away, they'd name a street after him. They'd throw him a ticker tape parade. He would walk out, accolades. He'd walk out an all-star because he stepped in during a tumultuous time. Crime is down, whether or not you believe that or not, or, there's different sides of that. And he stepped in a very hard time.
Yeah.
And just 2 months too late, a month too late, whatever you want to call it, from when it was the mayor at his side. He is a Chicago all-star, and sad to see him go. To he lied to me.
Yeah, lied to me. Boom, gone, right out. Just thrown away, and now the inspector general's investigating him.
Yeah,
throw all this
but
stuff
what
out
did
of
you
him.
think about the outing the family aspect of that? What were your thoughts?
Well,
on that?
I said that on the air at the time. I thought that the first remark by Lori Lightfoot was really unfair, where she said, okay, you publicly fire the guy, and then you say, I got the goods on him, but I don't want to give the goods out because I don't want to embarrass his family. Well, you just freaking embarrass his family.
Why not call him in the office and go, hey, quit today?
Yeah, don't do anything.
Exactly.
Just quit today.
Quit today. Go.
Let it go. Unless it's such an outrageous violation of law, propriety. But what they got so far does not strike me as that outrageous. So I feel the way it was handled it denigrated him. So the very thing she said she wanted to avoid, embarrassing the family, was the very thing she did.
What occurred?
Yeah, and so that didn't sit well with me. I don't know Eddie Johnson, never met the guy, but as I said, he stepped up at a very tumultuous time in the city of Chicago. And whether you I know there's a lot of people coming to the studio very critical of him because he kept his mouth shut all those years, looked the other way at all kinds of evidence of police misconduct, et cetera, and so forth. But he was given a very difficult job, to put it mildly, and plus I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for him because he stood up to Trump. Anyway, Jeff Johnson, we've run out of time. Had this whole other thing about the pension funds.
Never even got to it.
It's not going anywhere, young man. It'll be here next year. The state Pritzker signs measure to consolidate hundreds of pension funds. We'll be talking about some great quotes in the Tribune about the difference between Chicago and downstate, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be picking your brain in the coming year. Brandon Johnson in the studio. We're going to bring him on. Jeff, as I said to Miles, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you next year. How about that?
All right, brother. Love you.
Very good. That's Jeff Johnson, Brandon Johnson on deck. We'll bring him on when we return.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters. The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters.
Social workers, psychologists, counselors. We think that adequate services through special education.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them: Chicagoland Cremation Options.com. One more time: ChicagoLandCremationOptions.com.
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
And Brandon Johnson in the studio, Cook County Board Commissioner. A lot of Johnsons in the studio today. No jokes, all right? Jeff Johnson is left. Brandon Johnson's in the studio. He's going to be singing Jerry Butler songs when we bring him on. Yeah. I'm a huge Jerry Butler. I'm going to go on and on.
Ben's not going to sing anything at all because he's terrible at it.
I am terrible at it, but it doesn't stop me from singing. Oh, my God. Brandon Johnson, we're going to talk about presidential politics, local politics, and Jerry Butler. But before we do that, you got an update?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Why don't we find out another new law coming to Illinois in 2020? It's our holiday little special segment that we're doing here.
Okay.
We're calling it the 20 New Laws in 2020. Ben, we talked about our last new law. It was our first one there, teaching Illinois history. What were your thoughts on that again?
I had mixed feelings. I thought that was essentially an unfunded mandate they were dumping on teachers. That's what I thought. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, it's time for another new law coming to 2020. This one involves higher education. According to WTTW, the new law coming in 2020, every baby born in Illinois will soon receive $50 in a 529-style investment account to help pay for their future community college, university, or trade school expenses. It's not a lot of money for any one individual, but the intent of HB 2237 is to spur parents and guardians to contribute more money to their child's future education. While the law takes effect in the new year, the Treasurer's Office will spend 2020 setting up the program. The first babies eligible for the $50 seed money will be those born starting in January 2021. Want to know more? Amanda Vinecki explains the new law in detail on WTTW.com.
Yeah, I like this bill. I wasn't aware of it until you started reading it, but I like this bill. See what Brandon Johnson thinks about it. I'll give you my thoughts, and Brandon, you may weigh in, because I think anything that encourages people to think beyond the year that they're in and think long-term is helpful. And I say this as a person who is long-term. I realize I've been through the many phases of life, Brandon Johnson, as you like to remind me wherever you see me. And when I was 20 or 21, I never thought the day would come when I'd be 61. It never dawned on me, never occurred to me that such a thing could happen. Didn't think it would happen to me. But guess what, folks? You get old, and you have to think about things, their consequences. So I'm a big believer in people, just being practical and putting aside a little bit some for future time. And if this law encourages people to do that, I think it's okay. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad you gave clarity, Ben, because I thought this was a law to encourage people to have more babies.
Yeah, $50. Oh, wow, I have another baby.
Well, because the population loss in Illinois.
Is that what it's for? I don't believe that.
Maybe that's an
joke.
Unintended consequence.
My broke ass is about to do it. $50. Come on.
Well, look, I think that the law should go into effect this year, and the money should be available this year and connected to the census. Because I'm all about encouraging more black babies to be born.
Actually, the census, I hadn't even thought about that. I never thought that this was to encourage babies. $50?
I mean, look, if you can have a child, the child can be counted to keep our political power, and you get $50 to put towards their education. I haven't heard anything more progressive than that.
Wow.
Congratulations, Illinois.
Yeah, congratulations. So it's safe to say that Brandon Johnson would have voted for that bill had he been a state rep or a state senator.
Hey, 2 down, 18 more to go. It's the 2020 20 new laws in Illinois.
All right, very good. Brandon Johnson, a frequent guest on the show. Welcome back, Cotter.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
I said this yesterday when Carlos was on the show. Brandon and Carlos will be debating at the Hideout show that we do first Tuesday, February of 2020. And Carlos was already talking some serious trash about that debate.
Oh, wow.
He really was. And Carlos will be representing Bernie Sanders, and Brandon will be representing Elizabeth Warren. So you're looking forward to...
Yeah, I am. I have a lot of respect, of course, for my colleague, Carlos Rosa Ramirez, and his work that he does at the city council. We obviously are supporting 2 different candidates. My candidate just happened to have a black agenda. His doesn't. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation.
Well, it'll be a lot of fun. And with the wisecrack that he gave yesterday when he was on the show was that he wasn't sure if Elizabeth Warren would still be in the race February. So he said, you better have a Joe Biden person ready to come in.
That's funny. So Elizabeth Warren has spent $1.9 million on the air, and she's in second and third place. Sanders and Biden has spent $8 to $9 million on the air. So I haven't seen in a long time where a presidential candidate is moving a ground game and is still a top-tier candidate, hasn't spent much money in the air. So we'll be there. We'll be there all the way through. It's going to be an exciting time for our country. Obviously, the big goal, of course, is to build a platform that we can win on, and that's going to be critical.
All right. A lot of national politics to talk about, but let's just talk about something on the local front. Just briefly, you came from the county board meeting, and you said they were paying tribute to the legendary, the Iceman, Jerry Butler.
Yeah, so Jerry Butler, former Cook County Commissioner, and of course is just an amazing artist, humanitarian, graced us with his presence today at the county board. So the commissioner that now sits in the seat that Commissioner Butler had in the 3rd Cook County District, Bill Laurie, moved a resolution to honor him. I mean, and everybody was there. I mean, we packed out the chambers today, and we were graced by his presence, and not only did he receive honor today, he actually graced us with a song. And Ben, I can't tell you which song it was, but it was Jerry Butler. I don't know if it even mattered. It was just to see him there, and very conscious about what he is battling and what he's going through, but has an incredible sort of perspective around it, a great sense of humor. It was just great to see that tribute offered to him.
Well, let me give a little lesson for some of the younger listeners. Jerry Butler is unique in Chicago politics. He was a very high-profile entertainer for many years, going back to the 50s. He was in the Impressions with Curtis Mayfield. Then he went solo, had a huge run of hits. If I had a bet, I was not at the meeting. I was just in this. His probably best-known song is "Only the Strong Survive."
Yeah,
so I would guess
many times.
Okay, so my guess is that the song he would sing, or it would be "For Your Precious Love." May have been that one. Oh, that's a tough song to sing. Yeah. He had a lot of range back in the day. I was a huge Jerry Butler fan. I worshiped the ground the guy walked in when I was a kid. And then all of a sudden I was a young man, and Jerry Butler had a second career. Brandon, he ran for county board, and in those days it wasn't districts. You ran it large. And Jerry, I want to say it was 1986, and it was in the middle of council wars. Jerry Butler killed it. He won black wards and white wards, and the spirit of Jerry Butler carried and enabled him to win even in a very contentious time, racially contentious time in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all the accolade that was offered to him today, people spoke about just the attention that he was able to grab, and how serious people took him and his position, and how still he was, and in some cases on the floor, quiet, but you heard him, and very, very effective. People described him as one of the artists of persuasion, that if Jerry Butler spoke in favor of something, that it would move the board in that direction. So that's actually very, very powerful. So.
Well, I have this one moment that I remember about Butler as a county commissioner. It surprised me because he was quiet, he was like a kind of poker player. He kept his cards close to his vest. You didn't know which way he was going. Mike Quigley, back in the O's, discovered TIFs, and he made a move. This is when Mike Quigley was on the county board, so he had these reforms. I think he was trying to launch his mayoral career. That's a whole other thing, which he never did run for mayor. But the point is, he had these reforms that aggravated Mayor Daley, and Mayor Daley sent over some aldermen, Helen Schiller, Walter Burnett, came over to argue that for the county board that there should not be these TIF reforms. Really, he just didn't want anything over keeping him from spending TIF money whatever way he wanted, and he got Helen and Walter Burnett to carry his water. The only commissioner who voted with Quigley was Jerry Butler. I always remember that. Like, I would not have expected that. Forrest Claypool, he didn't do it. Pareka, Mr. Republican Independent, he was off the floor at the time, but Jerry Butler voted with him. So kudos to Jerry Butler.
Great history.
Yeah, I know the stuff
and
like
Ben,
that.
you have it all. got it all.
Brandon's like, man, how do you know about that?
all-
It's all up there in the
Like
noggin.
neatly tucked inside that sweater of yours. You all got to see Ben's beautiful blue sweater.
It is a beautiful blue
is.
sweater.
It fits like it did in the 80s. It's great.
You making fun of my sweater?
No, it looks good.
You know, my wife picked this sweater out. All right.
And you just can't let it go, can you?
This is a great sweater. And I'm wearing a red shirt in honor of you because you also work for the Chicago Teachers Union, so I was wearing that shirt. All right. So let me get your thoughts on what went down yesterday in the Chicago City Council before I turn it to national politics. I call it the Great Reefer Revolt. Walter Burnett, for a moment, we alluded to Walter Burnett. Alderman Walter Burnett joined the Reefer Revolt, and he later left the Reefer Revolt. We've been talking about it a lot for the last 48 hours. The black alderman in the Chicago City Council were trying to force Lori Lightfoot to have more black entrepreneurs selling legalized marijuana after January 1st, and they were ready to pass a legislation that would delay implementation of legalization in Chicago until July, and they pulled back. They got some concessions.
Yeah.
They pulled back. Your thoughts?
No, I think it's a great display of solidarity. The Black Caucus, and there were other members of the Latinx Caucus. I'm very proud that there were members of the Latinx Caucus and some folks who were part of the Democratic Socialists. I don't know if they have an official caucus, but it was really strong display for the city council and for members of the city council to actually stand up and say, look, our sisters and brothers in Springfield, took this legislation as far as they could take it. And those are realities. And in many cases, when you're trying to build, a structure, you have to lay a pretty good solid foundation first. And that's what I heard from the Black Caucus, that the General Assembly did what it could do. Mm-hmm. And it took this legislation as far as it could take it. And there's some great things in there, but I can't be mad at black folks standing up, fighting for black folks to have equity. I can't be mad at that, right? And again, I think it's like any, dynamic in our country, that there are laws that we're able to pass, and in certain bodies, we reach capacity. And for the Black Caucus to say out loud that look, here's an industry that it's about to make generational wealth possible. For white families in particular, because that's how it's been rolled out in Chicago, and to have, a law that we all know that when this industry was considered illegal, the families who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs have been black families in particular, and then of course brown families. I think it's only right and fitting for justice to be delivered in an equitable way for individuals who've been impacted in a disparate way to reap some benefit from, what will be a very massive, at some point, a very massive revenue generator for individual businesses. And so I commend them for that. I was especially proud, honestly, for, Alderman Jason Irvin and his leadership to be able to articulate in a very clear way about why this delay was important. And to get it right now, Ben, as you know, this is your best opportunity to set a course for it to be right for time to come, right? And when you don't get it right out the gate, it makes it difficult to go back and try to figure it out. I also was very grateful for some of the members of the Latinx Caucus that stood in solidarity with the Black Caucus, Byron Sigcho Lopez in particular, who was very clear and conscientious about not just his vote, but why this was important, especially for black communities. My good friend, again, Carlos Rosa, the alderman of the 35th Ward, again, stood in solidarity. Rosana Rodriguez, the 33rd Ward. That's a big deal for our city. And it's hard not to say that, we've played a part in helping leaders find their voices. Mm-hmm. We've been a part of, a resistance movement in Chicago over the last 10 years. Let's just say 2010, when, Karen Lewis assumed power at the Chicago Teachers Union. And we began to push back against just failed policies that continue to harm black and brown communities. And so there is a greater appetite. There's more familiarity with how to resist. And then the last thing, Ben, is this is what organizing is. You know, my tradition is also is a tradition of organizing and pulling people together to build a collective voice that can help strengthen communities. And that's what I saw. That's how I lead on the county board as well. How do we bring people to the table closer so that we can ultimately deliver what is right and what is just, particularly for people who have been set at the margins for a long time?
Were you satisfied with the compromise that was reached at the council yesterday?
I wanted more, you know, honestly, Ben. I wanted more, and it's not. It's really based upon like the needs that exist in districts like those who were leading the charge yesterday. You know, I in my district, first district of Cook County, I believe 4 of the 5 black wards on the west side of Chicago are in my district. So that's Alderman Burnett, Mitz, and Talia Farrell, Jason Irvin. Of course, his leadership was on display. And so what the Black Caucus was pushing the city to do would have a tremendous impact on how our communities can not just survive, but thrive in this new political economy. And so we need to create more opportunities for not just entrepreneurship, but for people to actually have a stable, decent job that they can go to with benefits and they can retire. You know, Ben, you mentioned something earlier. We tease about not thinking about 61, but we all eventually want to become, we want to be 61 because we want to live, but we also want to live, you know, in a fruitful way. You want to live knowing that there's just some benefit to your retirement. And so, yeah, I would have wished we could have gotten a little bit more out of that.
Do you think that the city will deliver? And where it equates to the nurses, to the teachers, I just had this conversation with Jeff Johnson, is that it brought back memories of the early days of the teacher strike, or right before the teacher strike, where I would have people defending Lori Lightfoot on the show, and they would say, well, Ben, you know, you're critical of Lori Lightfoot on that she won't agree to hire more nurses, but she is saying she will hire more nurses. And then I said, well, it should be, if she's going to hire them, she should put it in contract, she should put it in writing. So similarly, I suppose, if you are going to make sure that there are black entrepreneurs who get to sell recreational reefer, you should put it in writing, and it wasn't in writing. So do you see the parallels that I'm reaching?
No, absolutely. And so like people believe that somehow if you like someone in office that you can't criticize them. That to me, that's irresponsible. You know, as much as my wife likes me, trust me, Ben, she's got full of criticisms. But I know she's coming from a place of love. And again, what the General Assembly did, they laid a really solid foundation. You know, it's a very unique law that reflects, you know, what many states may have gotten wrong. You know, this what we did in Illinois really looked to address, you know, where other states came up short. And so now that the foundation has been established, you know, for the city council and at some point, you know, the Cook County Board of Commissioners, we have to look at this as well in a closer way, that it's time for us to begin to build the second floor. And then, of course, the third floor. And as I'm using this analogy, I think my father would be proud because he was a general contractor. I did not pick up that skill set. But what I do know is that when you're laying foundation, when you're trying to build a structure, you have to have a blueprint. And that blueprint, of course, is attached to contractual goals that you have for this particular project. To settle for anything less than not just how we can realize equity in Chicago, but to settle for anything less than it being in writing, it's just not responsible, because we have to have a pathway, you know, moving forward. The other, I think, neat thing about this law, though, is there is an equity study that they'll do. And so, you know, in the event, and we should anticipate this, that there will be some things that they won't get right. And how do we make sure that we create an infrastructure and levels of this, you know, new industry that allows us to set a new course if the pathway that we're on now is falling short? That's reasonable. And so the expectation that I have moving forward is to begin to think about, you know, not just how do we create more millionaires in this moment, but how do we make sure that we're generating the revenue from the sales to meet the needs that people have that I service at the county level, particularly around healthcare, reforming our justice system, redoing our infrastructure in Cook County. I have families in the western suburbs. When it rains, they can't get out their backyard because of the flooding. People in Maywood can't access clean water because the infrastructure is just falling apart. Like, we actually have an opportunity with revenue, and I know the governor has put a lot of hope in the Capitol bill, one that we haven't had in a long time, that I see all of this as interconnected. And it's a unique opportunity that we have right now. And, you know, my hope is that as we criticize and offer like legitimate critique to the structure that we're building, that we ultimately get it right when we see that there is a potential for it to go wrong. Because if it goes wrong, you know, lives are going to be impacted by that. Why not try to get it right?
Brandon Johnson is his name. He's a Cook County Board Commissioner. We're going to shift gears when we come back from break, talk national politics, impeachment, tonight's debate, and where Brandon thinks the Democrats should go to unseat Donald Trump. We'll be right back after this.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
Brandon Johnson in the studio. Brandon Johnson is not only a member of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, not only an activist, not only a leader of the Chicago Teachers Union, not only a baseball coach. Did you know that? Coaches baseball.
No, he's all those things and more?
And more. One other thing, all right? He's a great fashion critic. He critiqued my sweater. He walked in, he goes, what a sweater you're wearing, Ben. I'm like, my God, this guy does it all. He's a fashion critic. You thought I was going to go over the piano, but I fooled you. Anyway, he's also a great keyboard player. That's Brandon Johnson on the keyboards right there. Oh. Does it all, Brandon Johnson.
Look at him.
Doesn't he play so lovely? You know, because you got the new Coming to America coming out. You know?
Yes.
Randy Watson, so beautiful.
Can you, the new Coming to America, can you name the first line of the original Coming to America?
Oh, wow.
Oh, please.
Don't do that
filthy
to
line.
I would not do that to you, Brandon Johnson. Wow. But it's a very funny line, and it occurs when Eddie Murphy is having a bath, taking a bath, and we'll leave it at that. Miles is like, oh, yeah, man. Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. All right, Brandon Johnson, impeachment occurred. It went down. We talked about it a lot yesterday. Monroe Anderson in the studio was all fired up. He's been rooting for impeachment. for a long time. And your good friend Micah was in the studio yesterday, and he had the more lefty attitude. Well, it's just a diversion from what we should really be focusing on. So what's your take on impeachment?
Well, look, the amount of evidence against the current president was actually quite substantial. I mean, it's amazing of the type of case you have to bring against, someone of Donald Trump's stature. It's pretty overwhelming. What does strike me though about all of this is, and I don't know, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to polling, is that throughout all of this, his base of support is, pretty convinced that he is still the right person for our country. And so I think on some level, as much as I believe that this process was important and necessary, and I fully support the impeachment of Donald Trump, we also have to recognize that his base of support, amongst white women, I believe is 42%, something substantial. White men, 53%. Hispanic men, I believe is 37%. Hispanic women, 23%. There is one particular group of voters that are clear about who he is, and that's black women. Apparently, there are 3% of black women that are still okay with Donald Trump. But here's what's interesting about that number. I think that's within the margin of error.
This is one of my pet peeves. Yeah. No way.
Exactly.
No way. Brandon Johnson. I know a lot of black women. Yep. None of them are for Donald John Trump.
That's why. So I actually believe that's actually 0%.
It's zero.
It's 0%. Black men around 15%.
Well, that's another lie.
Yeah.
You tell me you put 100 black, just randomly take 100 black guys, put them in a room, 15 of them are going to be for Donald Trump?
No, I think maybe 8.
No way.
7 or 8.
There's 3 if you're lucky.
Okay. Well, I think the point though is that, and this is why I think it's important. I know we're going to have this discussion in the last couple of minutes about what it means to build a very radical progressive agenda. Mm-hmm. And it's obvious that if you got to win black voters, bottom line, you got to be able to speak to black women. Obviously, black men very much, conscientious about the history of this country and really where we need to go as a country. And Donald Trump has not placed us on that path, and the Republican Party, in large part, has actually failed. Not just their sort of their own ideological frame, but they failed in holding the office of the presidency accountable, and that's irresponsible. So for me, it's not a difficult vote. If I'm a member of, and I should be careful because I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea about this statement, but if I'm a member of Congress, that's not a difficult vote to make in favor of an impeachment. But it's also important to recognize that we have to build an apparatus that speaks again to the needs that people have. And, the number of children who live in poverty in this country, the number of families who do not have access to health care, like that has to be the story of the day. Mm-hmm. And not just, Donald Trump's, behavior. And certainly we should call it out. But for me, the bigger story is even after he's impeached, right? Even once he goes to his official trial with the Senate, folks are still looking for jobs. People are still, unfortunately, there's still no real background checks when it comes to guns in this country, no universal background checks. I passed a resolution today on the county floor calling for universal background checks for all guns. It did pass the House with some bipartisan support. You got some real doozies over there in the Senate. They're awful, Ben, on the Republican side. So the country is heading in the right direction in terms of how they are challenging, our leadership is challenging Donald Trump. But where I believe we're still falling short is that we have to, really live up to what I believe are progressive values that speak across party line, mm-hmm. speaks regionally to the interest of all residents of this country.
All right. So we mentioned earlier that you were supporting Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
You endorsed her. You were on the show, I can't remember when, and you talked about that. You mentioned a black agenda by Elizabeth Warren. Go into a little more detail about that.
Yeah, she's got a website, the Black Agenda. You go to Warren's website. She's dedicated an entire website that specifically deals with Black America. That's powerful. And, as much as I give Senator Warren credit for being willing to hear from black leaders and to hear from rank and file black folks around the country. I'm very humbled in this moment because a couple weeks ago, of course, we celebrated the life and the legacy of Fred Hampton, and Fred Hampton, born and raised in the 1st District, Maywood, and there's his family is still around. Many of them are still attached to Maywood in the west side of Chicago. But when you think about someone like Senator Warren, who is a white woman from the Northeast, running, quite frankly, on black liberation ideology, so when we talk about access to Medicare, making that available for everyone, it was Fred Hampton that opened up clinics and hired black doctors. That's a black idea. When we think about her stance on public education and why it's important that we invest in neighborhood schools, because the school system, particularly the public school system, made up of black children. That's where we send our children. It was Fred Hampton's vision to have, breakfast for every single child. Now across America, every child will eat before they go to school. Fred Hampton talked about how public education, it being the access, to bring the type of democratic structure and change to our country that was so desperately needed then and it is now. And, from her position, Senator Warren's position around infant mortality and dealing directly with how black mothers are not receiving the quality prenatal care that they need and throughout their pregnancy, that the stats that speak to how black mothers in particular lose. Her commitment to that is important. She talks about reforming our justice system in a way that speaks to the things that I've passed at the county level, like the just housing ordinance, that, we're not going to look past someone's record beyond 3 years. And then you can't ask about their record until we determine if they have the ability to pay for housing first. That should not be the first thing we ask. And so Senator Warren speaking directly to black folks is important. Now, this does not dismiss the fact that we do need a rainbow coalition of working class folks. But as we've seen with Donald Trump's polling, the surest group about the direction of this country, it's always been the consciousness of black people. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. And if someone wants to be president of these United States and the type of direction that we know we need to go in to, they have to be clear about how policies will impact, communities that understand these issues.
Well,
in some cases, all too well.
Let's assume that for the sake of this discussion, Elizabeth Warren is the Democratic nominee. To avoid a repeat of what went down in 2016, what would you say she has to do to get encourage to raise black voting turnout? Let me just summarize. Black turnout fell in the 2016 presidential election relative to 2012. And a lot of people, when they talk about this, allude to a New York Times article about Milwaukee. I don't know if you ever saw that article where the reporter went into a barbershop in Milwaukee. Very good article. I urge everybody to read it. We've talked about it on this show a lot. But I just did my own little minor survey here in Chicago, and I took a look at black wards. And the only good thing out of segregation in Chicago is that come election time, you could see how black people voted. That's why I say with utter certainty, there is no way black people, 15% of black men, you cannot show me a black ward in the city of Chicago where Donald Trump got 2% of the vote. So there's no mathematical, and I convinced there's some white guy living down there that voted for Trump. But so in the 8th ward, which is a overwhelmingly black ward in the south side of Chicago, I just looked at these numbers, Brandon. The turnout fell from 2012 to 2016. So it wasn't just Milwaukee. The consequences in Milwaukee were bigger because it affected the way Wisconsin went, and Wisconsin went for Trump. As a result, they got the electoral votes he needed to be president in Illinois. But it still fell. It was like 10 percentage points, pretty significant drop. So in your humble opinion, what should Elizabeth Warren do if she's the nominee to ensure that black turnout rises and not falls?
Yeah, she's got to do what she's been doing. And first of all, thank you for lifting up the example in Milwaukee. It's a really good case study, and I think Detroit is also another story, and of course Pittsburgh, because we look at some key places where I don't know if we call her Senator Hillary Clinton or Ambassador Hillary Clinton, but Senator Ambassador Hillary Clinton, at the time with the votes
I believe
dropped.
Madam Secretary.
Madam Secretary, thank you, Secretary, thank you. That's right, Madam Secretary. That that we lost those states because where the black votes were, we experienced what you just talked about. There was an incredible drop off, and that, so this is what we've been able to, influence the Senator Warren's campaign, is to invest in the ground. And so this is the challenge about presidential campaigns, because there's so much money, Ben, that's spent in presidential campaigns that no one ever thinks about hiring organizers and actually building a field operation, because so much money is going to be spent in the air, right? And you're seeing that with Mayor Bloomberg, like $100 million already. Joe Biden has spent millions of dollars. The only person who is a top-tier candidate that has not spent, and she's under $2 million right now, Senator Warren, because her investment has been on the ground. Right here in Illinois, we've hired field organizers for the west side of Chicago, the 7th Congressional District where I live, and for the 1st Congressional District. That's Bobby Rush's district, one of the largest voting black congressional districts in the entire country. And so the campaign is very much committed to like our style of organizing. And it's why I believe, to your question, what Senator Warren is doing, what she has to do, that wasn't done in 2016, you actually have to go out and talk to voters. And the reason why that's important, I'm not saying that, obviously you can't build, I don't know if you can build a field team that can cover all of the precincts all over the country, particularly in black spaces. But what we can do, if we spend enough time on the ground, it can instruct and inform how we behave, beyond the field operation. So whether that's, radio, whether it's television, whether it's mailers, whether it's town halls, like there's a host of things that you can do that can help reach those voters. And I just don't believe that the party spent enough time on the ground engaging voters to get a better sense of where the voters were living. And had we spent time on the ground, we would have known, like, this is like, folks are not excited and they're not, getting hyped about, voting. And, we might be taking this election for granted, right? Because we're going to assume that these voters, black voters in particular, are going to vote for us, because who else are they going to vote for? And so the question is not who we're going to vote for. The question is, how many of us can you get to vote for who we're going to vote for? And why Senator Warren is investing in that now is so that when the summer comes around and when she's the Democratic nominee, we already have infrastructure in states all over the country. We're already in Detroit. We're obviously here in Chicago. We're building campaign offices in places like, Kansas City, Missouri. So we're in St. Louis. I mean, building these field operations where black voters are, engaging black voters so that as they become more familiar with the different candidates that are available to them, then Senator Warren won't be a sort of this this unknown, if you will. So we got to really ramp that up. I commend her for it. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna go on record and say, look, I know this is risky, because all of your conventional wisdom is to say spend it on digital. I mean, you know what the campaigns have turned into now, Ben, from what they were and what they are now. You would say digital. You would see cable buys, local television buys, and just let that become your way to reach voters. What Senator Warren is doing is so critical, because it doesn't just set her up to become the Democratic nominee. It doesn't just set her up to become the president. Mm-hmm. It sets our movement up to elect other progressive voices at all levels of government.
All right. I have to ask you before you leave about another candidate in the race, one that you're not supporting, but is perhaps the candidate, the presidential candidate most linked to the issue of race in a very bizarre way, and that would be Mayor Pete of South Bend. Many articles written about his inability to have traction with black voters. And there's some new articles written about his inability to have traction with younger voters, but that's a whole separate issue. It seems like white baby boomers love the guy. So what's your sense of why Mayor Pete has failed so far to win over black voters?
Yeah, it doesn't appear to me that Mayor Pete has ever had like a laser focus or a prioritization in his current capacity or his previous capacity as mayor of South Bend. It doesn't appear that he's ever had a commitment to or connection to black voters, not in a real substantive way. I mean, you have retail politics that exists all over the country, so I'm sure that there's some folks in his hometown, a couple of folks here or there, will feel some sort of attachment to him for whatever reason. But I think the largest reason is not just him not having a history of having real connection with black voters. His message is wrong. He's just wrong. His message is wrong. There's a reason why the corporations and the billionaires, the millionaire class, have placed their investment in his ideology, because it maintains a status quo. It also speaks to a level of privilege that people have become very accustomed to in this country, and that they feel like they're losing hold of it. And that's white privilege. And Pete embodies that. Can I be very frank here? Only in America could a white man from a town that's not half the size of my county district could be in a position to be the president of the United States. And this is no disrespect to South Bend, but I've just passed a budget at the county level that overwhelms the budget of South Bend. There are 350,000 constituents in the first district. Mayor Pete has governed over about 100,000. Has not moved a significant budget, has never had to weigh in on like large scale issues and matters that impact people's lives in a very dramatic way, has never had to oversee a budget and make decisions around people's health care and how a court system is run, right? And it's that is one reason too, in that there's a certain safety that he provides for the class of people that have been used to ruling, and he becomes that that symbol, that mascot for that ideology and that frame that, quite frankly, it's dying and it's losing. He becomes that hope. That here you have, again, 0% of black women support Donald Trump, but there's not a black woman that's a front runner. You got black men, maybe not holding the line as strong as black women, but are doing it a lot better than any other group, right? And, you got Cory Booker out there, though. He's got some issues, right? He's got a lot of issues. But I think the point is that you have the most committed, consistent group of voters, black folks, and it's not reflected in its top tier in terms of the Democratic Party. And quite frankly, it's not reflected in terms of the ideological frame in which Mayor Pete has presented. He's not talking about, securing public education and expanding public accommodations and taxing the wealthy. He's finding nuanced ways to allow them to slip out of their obligation to actually commit to this economy so that other folks can benefit. That's his problem. And I hope it dies. I do. I hope that ideological frame dies and we put an end to this elitist form of governance that has caused tremendous pain to many families across the country.
That said, if he's the nominee, you would support him.
That said, it's a very sad state if the choice comes down to Donald Trump and someone like Mayor Pete. Now, obviously, I'm going to vote Democrat. I mean, I don't think that there's any secret there. But if we're left with that, we should anticipate another 4 years of Donald Trump. If he can't convince black voters to vote for him now, he's not going to convince them in November, not at the numbers in which we're going to need to beat Donald Trump. If Mayor Pete is the nominee, we should anticipate that Donald Trump is going to be president for 4 more years.
Well, I'll ask you the Bernie question. I've asked all the people coming to the studio. I'm curious to get your response to it. I call it the Bernie question. It could also be the Elizabeth Warren question, but I don't think it applies as much to her as Bernie, and I'll explain. I've been noting this in stuff I write and comments I make in the show that, for lack of a better word, the centrists in the Democratic Party Bernie really grinds their gears, and he really irritates them, and to put it mildly. And so one way or another, they're letting you know that they oppose him. And I've heard, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I've been hearing these rumors, reading the newspaper. Sources say that Barack Obama may actually make a statement about that. He may come out and say, something negative about Bernie, which would be really rare for a former president to get so involved one way or the other. So the question I've been asking of all my friends of the centrist persuasion, all my life I've been told, push come to shove, hold your nose and vote for the Democrat. And always I vote for a lefty in the primary, lose. And then I'd have to vote for some Bill Clinton or Mike Dukakis or what have you. So do you think the centrists will follow the advice that they give the Bens of the world if Bernie or Elizabeth Warren, but more Bernie than Elizabeth, is the nominee? Do you think they'll hold their nose and vote for Bernie? Or do you think they'll vote Trump?
It's a good question. I think most folks would, if holding, your nose is the I guess the analogy that you're using. I think most folks would do that. What I'm also convinced of, though, if it's Elizabeth or if it's Bernie, there's going to be a tremendous uptick in terms of voter turnout, and that's the part that excites me the most. Is that this is not just simply about a centrist making a decision that is in the best interests of all Americans, quite frankly, because the world is not going to come to an end, if or when, a more progressive person becomes president. But what we do know, and I'm pretty confident about, I should say, is that there's going to be a tremendous push for voter turnout because folks are excited about those two candidates. There's more inspiration to still be had in this moment. I believe all the candidates need to work harder to inspire and to capture the imagination of the electorate. But I am pretty confident that a nominee that reflects progressive values, you're going to have offices across this country with volunteers, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for our democracy, and it's not only good for our democracy for this particular election. It's good for our democracy for future elections because we got to win some local seats as well.
Oh, yeah.
That's one thing that we did lose as a result of President Obama's presidency, that we lost pretty much every election after the first one that he won.
That's a topic for another day. The Democratic Party went to sleep under Obama. They had a very charismatic leader, very much a centrist, and there was no follow-up, in my humble opinion, and that's led to Donald Trump. It's pretty obvious to me. Anyway, Brandon Johnson, we're out of time. Thank you very much. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I'll see you in the coming year. I'll have you back on the show, and I'll see you at the Hideout first Tuesday in February.
And you also have a radio show, is that correct?
That is another job that I have.
Oh, my God.
Thank you.
This guy, he's so good.
That is impressive. I appreciate that. Yes, every single Sunday morning from 9 to 10 a.m., WCPT.
What's that station again?
Yeah.
It's WCPT 820. They fired you.
Oh,
remember?
yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Where facts sometimes matter.
Yeah. Well, you didn't get the Eddie Johnson treatment, at least.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, this saved your family embarrassment. Oops, I just pretty much embarrassed your family now.
No, but if you haven't checked out Brandon's show, it's really fantastic. Sundays, 9 a.m. A very learned man.
Yeah, maybe we'll bring Brandon over our station, huh? Our little thing here. But that's all story for another time. Brandon Johnson, the man, the myth, the legend. He does it all. And yes, indeed, he has a radio show as well.
Where can I get one of those sweaters, by the way, Ben?
I have one. This is my Christmas present for you. In fact, I'm just going to give you this one right now. As I said, Brandon Johnson, he's a Cook County Commissioner. He is an activist. He plays the piano. And he is a fashion critic.
That's correct.
He knows a lot about everything. He's also a baseball coach. And I want to thank Jeff Johnson, Miles Kampf-Lassin, and, of course, Miles Porter, the man, the myth, the legend. We're going to be sticking around to do a bonus with Miles, talk about our beloved Bulls. And, of course, the man, the myth, the legend.
Oh, a lot of men, myths, and legends.
Yes. The pride and joy of Illinois, Alton, Illinois. And as Brandon Johnson can tell you, back home in Alton, they call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise, take it out of petty cash, everybody.
Not sure why he does that. And remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcast. And hey, downloaders, you know we live stream this program, right? Yeah, we do. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Once again, at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. And hey, speaking of that YouTube channel, when you listen live or watch live, whatever you do, join the live stream chat room. It's a fantastic time. Like-minded political junkies going back and forth. People making fun of Ben. It's great. Go check it out, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.